going to stop feedback. All right, we're going to get started here on our Tuesday, May 2nd, 2023 Marina City Council
Recording
meeting.
in progress.
Thank you for being here tonight, everybody. Juan's here, so now we can get started with our City Council meeting. We did not have closed session, so we'll start with a roll call, please. Anita?
Here. Here. Present.
Here. Great. Everybody's here. Would someone like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance from the Poppy Foundation? All right. The National Poppy Day, we'll get to that in just a moment. And your name? Rebecca Glennie of the National Poppy Day representing will lead us on our Pledge of Allegiance after a moment of silence.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Elena, for being a good sport. Jumping right in there. We're gonna have our council person, Elizabeth Fisher, summarize our proclamation for National Poppy Day. And then we'll turn it over to Elena if she has any comments and guidance, direction.
Thank you, Mayor. So proclamation, whereas poppies are worn and displayed as a symbol tribute to our fallen and the future of living veterans and service members. And whereas at the end of World War I, the American Legion family adopted the poppy as a symbol of freedom and the blood sacrificed by troops in war times. The symbolic use of the poppy comes from the poem In Flanders Fields, which movingly begins, in Flanders Fields, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row, referring to the poppies that sprang up in the churned up earth of newly dug soldiers' graves over parts of Belgium and France. And whereas the American Legion family has long utilized the red poppy as its official flower, symbolizing the bloodshed by those who have served in our US military, and the meaning and symbolism of the poppy, mirroring the manner in which the poppy is symbolically showcased in England and Canada in celebratory fashion on their Remembrance Day, also known as Armistice Day and Poppy Day. And whereas wearing a poppy will unite citizens from across the country who decide to show their patriotism. And whereas May 25, 2023 would be an appropriate date to designate as National Poppy Day. So now, therefore, be it resolved that Mayor Bruce Delgado and the City Council of the City of Marina hereby proclaim May 25, 2023 as National Poppy Day and ask that all residents and visitors in Marina to join in observing this day to honor every service member who has died in the name of liberty, freedom, and democracy. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Well read. Thank you very much. Elena, would you like to come to the podium and
Mayor, thank you so much for having us and declaring Poppy Day this month for us. We are in the unit.
Oh, thank you. My name is Rebecca Glennie. I am the unit president for Monterey Cypress Unit 694 here in Marina, California. And with me today, I also have Lupe Martinez, who is likely going to be our incoming president for next year. And we also have Joey Martinez, who is the veteran. He's one of our Legionnaires at Post 694 and likely become, oh, your first vice, yes. And I believe going to be the incoming commander. So for the auxiliary itself, we have about 150 members here for the city of Marina. And so we're very proud to represent being spouses of active duty as well as military veterans, and also female dependents of those military members as well. So we do ask that on Poppy Day, you wear a red poppy, to support our military. We do have poppies that we'd love to pass around, as well as a bookmark that just gives a little bit more information about poppies. Maybe we go ahead and do that, Mayor? Yes. Thank you.
And Rebecca, I apologize. Calling you.
It's okay. My daughter is Alana.
That makes a little bit.
Yes.
And Rebecca's also passing the hat.
I see.
Okay.
What is that?
This is for the end.
Oh, no worries. We're not allowed to sell poppies, only offer them up for donation, so it's perfectly fine.
That's small.
There we go. Thanks so
Oh,
much.
yeah, thank you. You can take one of these. Oops, now you're here. Can I hand you the Rebecca? Can I have this? This is supposed to be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for the support.
And for everyone to know, the American Legion has been very involved in our community for decades, including before the city was incorporated before 1975. For decades, they provided us a Labor Day parade. And many of our ceremonial events have been held at the American Legion. And they're a stalwart of our community. We really appreciate everything the American Legion has done and continues providing our community. Thank you very much for being here, representing them, keeping them going. It's a smaller and smaller crew that keeps the American Legion going. So they can always use support and volunteers and help from the community. Rebecca, did you have anything else you want?
I had one more thing that I just kind of dawned on me to remind everybody on Memorial Day, on the actual Memorial Day itself, at 11 a.m. The Post will have our annual Memorial Day ceremony, followed by a light lunch, and everybody is welcome to attend.
And those are wonderful ceremonies.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you too, Joey and Lupe. Okay, now we go to public comment. We'll start with public comment, people here in person. Oh, sorry. Hang on a second, Don. Heidi, our city council is telling us to, yeah, I was wrong. We go to council and staff first. So any announcements from council, staff? Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Marina Dirksen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to report back. Is this the right time from my TAMSI meeting?
Yeah, you can do that now or at the end, either way. Now or at the end.
Okay.
It's
Is there a
great.
preference, Mr. City Manager?
Typically, the end is reporting on your meetings and conferences attended.
Okay, I will wait till the end on that. Then I wanted to make a comment about the bike pump track. Is that the correct time to do it? I wanted to invite everyone to our pump track grand opening. This is your tax dollars at work. This is a very exciting, one of the most exciting things to happen to our community. It's over at Gloria Jean Tate Park. It is going to be May 13th from 11 to 2. Our Public Works have been working very hard on it, and hats off to Public Works and all of our partners. Free food, tacos, music, bike giveaways, helmets. Live for Ross Fund of the Community Foundation will be donating helmets to us. It's an all around incredible, fun day. And yeah, I might have crashed on my bike, maybe. Not quite sure. So I wanted to announce that this is going to be a fantastic event. Everyone is welcome. We have partners who will be fixing bikes. So if your children or you need your bike fixed, just bring it. The other thing I want to mention is the second annual George Floyd Reimagining Police and Inclusion and Diversity Symposium, a communication of a community communication and healing exposition that everybody's invited to. It's free, May 25th, 2 to 4, actually 2 to 5 at the Oldmeyer Center. And this is going to be, there will be an art component, and I'm hoping our city can take part in some manner. And then the other thing I was going to mention was hats off to Kite Day that happened this past Saturday. It was so much fun. Thank you to all the volunteers. And that is about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Councilmember Elizabeth Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to know that a special message for the youth, 18 and under. The Monterey Salinas Transit is offering the summer pass. Any youth can ride any of the MST buses in June, July, and August for only $38. And more information can be found on the website mst.org. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. I want to give a thank you to Marina Coast Water District, who sent their entire staff of 45 employees over to our future Hilltop Park a Friday, 2 Fridays ago, and they planted 1,450 plants at our park, all native plants grown by volunteers. And then they pulled a lot of ice plant, and then they pulled a lot of annual weed grasses. So they did a lot of work, and I wanted to thank them for that. It was a really good partnership between them and city. This past weekend, pretty neat event. There was a movie shown from second base in the infield at Los Arbolos Sports Complex by the Youth Pony Baseball of Marina, and it was a fundraiser. And the people sat on the grass in left field and watched this movie, and it was great video and really good audio. So it was like being in a drive-in movie without the cars. Everybody on the lawn. Really a fun event, and they raised a lot of money and they served a lot of good food. So just hats off, because these are the volunteers that are, during the week and on weekends putting on games and practices. It's a lot of volunteer effort. Then they dig a little deeper to put on these additional events, such as this movie. The movie they showed was you probably know it, called Sandlot. It was great. It was great. And there was just so many kids and dogs, and it was really a cool event. And like Mayor Pro Tem said, we had another event same weekend, Marina Kite Day. I think it was the first annual, but I'm sure that it's going to happen again every year just before Mother's Day. And it's at Marina Vista School. And it was a lot of fun and a lot of kites given away for free to kids. Really a fun event. So hope that you all can think about that next year. This Sunday, we're having our monthly litter pickup. So there's about 14 miles of roadside that we try to pick up and bike trail each second Sunday of the month. So this coming second Sunday at 10 a.m., we'll meet at the southern junction of Lapis Road and Del Monte Boulevard, and we'll pick up litter for a couple hours. And then we'll have free pizza, and we'll compile everything, get it all organized, looking nice for the Waste Management District to pick up the following Monday. That's what I got. And anyone else? Okay. All right. So now we'll move on to the public, starting with anyone in the live audience here. If you want to come up and tell us anything that's not on tonight's agenda that's on your mind.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, staff, for this moment of public comment. My name is Alyssa Rendon. I'm the Community Relations Manager at the Monterey County Convention and Visitors Bureau, the CVB, or C Monterey. And just here for a brief update on what we've been up to over the last few months. I'd like to first start with the March storms that were devastating to our communities and our hospitality industry, and to share that during that time, our organization shifts from promotional to informational. And I myself was stationed at the County Emergency Operations Center to make sure that I was on the front line of information so that we could be the best resource we could be, not only for visitors coming in, but for our hospitality staff, industry, and residents. During that time, we reactivated our hotel evacuation rate program, and we had over 35 hotels participate across the county, 3 here in Marina. So thank you to those Marina hotels that offered their support to our displaced neighbors. And moving from the storms, our organization shifts into recovery. And so we've invested a lot more in journalists, influencers, writers coming to Monterey. And in the last 2 weeks, 3 have stayed here in Marina, writing about Marina State Beach, and the county in general. So along with the invested PR, we've also put a lot of focus into our marketing campaigns. Just to name a couple really interesting ones, we have a Pro v Pro series that's leading up to the US Women's Open coming in July, and we match a pro female golfer with a pro female local, and they do a couple minutes golfing. The first series was with Sweet Rebas. They did a couple minutes filmed minutes of baking, and then it's a beautiful, fun destination video that we can share. So there'll be more coming out, and you can find those on our website. And next is the artichoke campaign that we've launched, and it's ongoing, but it's gotten national coverage, being on Rachel Ray, almost a 15-minute segment. And it's been a beautiful way to showcase the artichoke, which is kind of a big deal. And it doesn't just start and end in Castroville, but it's a story that extends across the county. So we've been able to develop this trail that goes all the way to Big Sur and has a few stops even here in Marina. So it's been a fun project for us. And 2 minutes. Okay. So just a brief mention on sustainability and responsible travel. It's kind of the foundation of what we practice at the CVB. And it's an important part of the future of the tourism economy in general. And the CVB is really trying to step up so much that our CEO and president, Rob O'Keefe, is the chair of the Sustainability Committee for California Travel Association. So we're looking forward to working with them more on these initiatives. He was sort of brought into that because Monterey County is seen as a destination on how to do things better in general, and people kind of look to us. So we strive to continue to do things better and innovate and be the leaders in that realm. So looking forward to reporting more on that and looking forward to continued partnership. I know we've been hearing as we go through our rebrand about the culture and soul, the diverse culture and soul of Marina, and how we can share that story through our branding. So thank you again for this moment, and looking forward to working more closely.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa? Lisa, I recently heard you gave a shout out. The Monterey County Convention and Visitor Bureau gave a shout out to our hand car operation. It's one more thing people can do when they come to town, and we appreciate any support you give to that operation because it helps our restaurants and gets people to town. And that family that puts that on has worked so hard that we want to do what we can to support them so they can support the rest of us.
They've been great collaborators, and I really hope that other people reach out to us and we can collaborate with other attractions in the area and restaurants and everybody.
All right. We have a question for you from our Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for the update. Could you tell us a little bit about the influencers that came and what that might translate into and how we might follow or know what resulted? Thank you.
Absolutely. Most recently, off the top of my head, there was an influencer at Alley Eats that was here a week ago that stayed at Sanctuary Beach Resort and posted many stories, not only there, but on Marina State Beach and at Saltwood. And you can find her stories at her handle that I just shared. I can share with you also a list when published, but there was California Bountiful, which is I think a 30-minute TV series segment based out of the Bay Area. And there was Men's Travel journalist that was in town, but I can give you more details. I'm happy to follow up with that and share those links and publications. Yeah, of course.
Thanks for all your work, Lisa.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming here tonight as well. I forgot to mention there's a Teachers Appreciation Mixer tomorrow. It's our chance to appreciate teachers in Monterey County. And it's always held once a year at the American Legion. So it's tomorrow, May 3rd, Wednesday, at 3 p.m. So it goes from like 3 till 5 p.m. It's free food, free drinks. People just ask to go there to appreciate teachers. All right. So now we're ready for public comment. Getting ahead of myself there. So does anyone in the public, anyone else want to comment at this time? Then we'll move to people online, and we'll start with Grace Silva Centella. Welcome, Grace.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. You can hear me okay?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening. So first I only want to announce some really exciting Friends of the Marina Library events coming up this Friday and Saturday from 10 to 5 o'clock. And Sunday from 10 to 1 will be our big book sale down at the library. It's a great opportunity to stock up on wonderful reading material, and I hope you all will pop in and purchase a few books, because all of that money then goes back into supporting book purchase and activities and events at the library. And then two other Friends of the Marina Library events coming up to add to what the mayor and the mayor pro tem have announced about events happening on May 13th. May 13th in the morning will also be our monthly Dad's Read event, a very popular activity for young families, their children, their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts, their brothers, their sisters, and that's from 10 to 12 there at the Marina Library. You can hop on down and enjoy the grand opening of the pump track. And then if you are 16 or older, we will have our monthly independent movie matinee event in the community room, and we'll be showing the 2021 film, The Duke, starring Jim Broadbent and Helen Mirren. So it should be May 13th will be a really exciting day happening in Marina, and I hope that we see you at the book sale this coming weekend, and we see you at Dad's Read next weekend, and if you're 16 or older, we'll see you at the movie. Thank you.
That's great, Grace. Thanks for all that information. Anyone else from the public online that would like to raise their hand to speak? We'll give you a moment. Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Thank you, Grace and Elisa, who just left, for giving us information like that. And now we're going to go to our consent agenda. Does any council member have any brief question or brief comment or wish to pull something for lengthy or discussion? Councilmember McCarthy?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a brief comment about the landscape districts. I know there's a few more than what are on here. Is that the reason we don't get them all at one time? Is that because their fiscal calendar is different, or what's the reason behind that?
Councilmember, Mr. Mayor, Council, Brian McMahon, Public Works Director. So they're on slightly different cycles. The ones that are on the agenda for tonight were established under the Landscaping and Lighting Act. And so they're landscape districts. The other ones are community facilities districts, a little bit different organization. And those typically come forward around June timeframe, with both of those reporting what the new assessments are to the county to get on the rolls. So just a little bit different organization and how they're structured.
Okay, so are the fiscal, do you know, are the fiscal calendars for the three we're looking at today, are they that start and end at the same month, or?
Yeah, they're all on the same cycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also had a few questions about the management districts.
There's a few questions and maybe.
Yeah, should it be pulled? Yes, okay.
Did you have it on all of them or particular?
It's general questions so either one.
Okay.
So
Should
the
we
three.
pull all of them and then hear all the questions? Sorry. Okay. Yeah, we'll pull those from the consent agenda and we'll go now to Mayor. Was that all you had?
Yes, thank you.
Then we'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Medina Dirksen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question comment on the job description for the engineer position, city engineer. My question is, do we have in the qualifications, is it customary to, or might it be a practice that we might consider is to use some equivalent experiences? And I say that with the lens of attracting candidates and us show being flexible in the sense of when we look at equity, what kind of candidates we hope to attract. As I've done research, sometimes steadfastness might lead to not being as welcoming to diverse populations. So as we put on our diversity inclusion lens, might there be some qualifications that could possibly use words and or equivalents?
Well, I mean, some of that possibly, but the one thing it does require is a professional engineer's license, and there's certain legal requirements for that, certain approvals that the city has to do. And so typically the route for that is to get a degree. And some of that's kind of the prerequisites to get into that and pass some of the qualifying exams. So this one does have one particular requirement, that professional engineer's license.
But I will add that flexibility is written into the job description that way. And so it says a typical way to obtain these is through this experience and level of education, but it's not a firm requirement. But as Brian said, for a city engineer, you absolutely have got to have certain licensing requirements. They have to have civil engineering experience, and you can't swap that for.
No, I do understand that, especially like a PE's license or something like that. But I guess as we move forward, and one of our guiding principles has been an eye to equity, inclusion, diversity, and just being a wide swath. Sometimes job descriptions can be a little intimidating or not welcoming. That's all.
Yeah, and if I'll read from our job description. It absolutely does that in all of our job descriptions. It says any combination of experience and training that would likely provide the required knowledge, skills, and abilities is qualifying. A typical way is through these experience. So it's wide open to do that. And we have that in all of our job descriptions.
I very much appreciate that. Thank you very much as we keep this in mind. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Viola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ask a quick question. Maybe Brian, you can stay there on 10F5. And my question is, because this job position, it doesn't impact the general fund and it's really all financed through the developers and the CIP budget. Was there any barriers for us to have not hired, put out a position for this earlier? I mean, why was there something preventing us from having this full-time position?
I would say we've kind of ramped up in this and kind of our oversight. And I think this is a result of, our growing stuff that's in the budget and a growing city, basically.
You'll typically see cities our size, you'll have a public works director, city engineer combined as one, or as they start to get busier, larger, then they'll split it off. And so we are typically, but we have so many capital projects and things going on that it's the appropriate time to split them off, just because the public works director can't give the oversight that is needed on a daily basis.
Thank you very much.
Let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I hate to ask this question, but I'm just curious. I heard Councilmember Vischer just said she had a couple of quick questions. Why would we need to pull all of the items for that? If she's not giving direction, it's not in the staff report.
It's discretionary, but at this time, we're not supposed to have lengthy discussions on something that's a consent. If we think we're going to have like that was almost too much,
Okay.
but it's a discretion. There's no hard black and white, but if it takes more than a minute, it's probably too much. And then we need to pull it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. So when she said she had several questions, obviously that's going to take a few minutes. So we thought we'd do the best to pull it. I always confer with Heidi if it's uncertain.
I'm just hoping we can foster a paradigm where we can ask quick questions and not feel like we're, creating a meeting that's unnecessarily long. So that's my only concern. But
Yeah, it's a balancing act.
thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All right, so would someone like to make a motion? Minus 10F2, 3, and 4?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, so the motion is to approve the consent agenda minus those 3 items. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. All right, so thank you. That motion passes unanimously, and we'll take up those consent items that were pulled at the end of the meeting after our action item. And so now I think we will go on to our action item, which regards objective standards. And I think a lot of work has gone into this. So we're looking forward to this presentation. There's no action tonight, just a presentation on the objective design standards. And Guido's going to lead us through this.
Yeah, I just wanted to have some introductory remarks just because we've gotten some feedback. So number one, tonight really is just a check-in with the council. There will be no guidelines that are going to be adopted. There are going to be multiple bites at the apple. We are bringing the draft guidelines back to the council. Then we're bringing the final version back, and in between all of that, this stuff will be put on the web and shared with the community. The other concern or comment just wanted to address is this project is actually in a very limited scope. When you look at the city of Marina, you've got the downtown plan that will have its own objective standards. We've got Marina Station, Sea Haven, and the Dunes that all have their own set standards. So we just wanted to, just emphasize this is for a very limited scope in terms of where this is going to apply. And then today, we're really just trying to keep it at a very high level. What we heard from the community, what we heard from various architects and design professionals, sharing that with the council, trying to get feedback from the council, and then quickly moving towards working on the actual meat and potatoes, which is the actual guidelines themselves. So just wanted to provide those introductory comments. And we do have Remy and Associates helping us draft these, and they will be doing the bulk of the presentation tonight.
Good evening, Mayor Delgado, Mayor Pro Tem Dirksen, and members of the City Council. I'm Simran Malhotra, Principal with Remy and Associates, and I'm glad to be here today to give you an overview of where we are with this very important project. I have with me Alessandra Lundin, an associate with our firm, and she and I will be making the presentation today. Let me start by sharing my screen. I think you can all see it.
Yes, looks good.
So great. So what we'd like to do is give you an overview of the project, a summary of where we are on the overall project and the schedule, and then spend most of our time presenting the key takeaways from the analysis we've done so far, as well as the results from the visual preference survey that we have conducted in the community over the last couple of months. And then we are happy to answer any questions you might have. I'd also like to note that last week we met with Council members Biala, Vischer, and McCarthy to answer their specific questions about this project. So to start off, what is the project and why we are doing this? As you all know, over the last several years, there have been several state laws that have changed how cities can approve housing projects. These include SB 35, SB 330, and there have been several changes to the Housing Accountability Act. And the reason the state passed all this new legislation was to increase housing production in several ways. First, this legislation makes it difficult for cities to deny or reduce density of housing projects if these projects meet objective standards. So most cities today have design guidelines that are subjective in nature, and these guidelines are interpreted differently by different city staff, by architectural review boards, and city councils, etc. And this requirement eliminates the subjectivity and personal judgment by requiring that consistent and uniform language be used. The second way these laws affect how cities approve projects is by streamlining the amount of time it takes for projects to get approved. And the idea behind this is that this will provide certainty to developers regarding how long it would take for their projects to receive approvals. So the goal of this project is to create objective design standards with language that is clear and explicit in its direction, and to balance flexibility in design with a universal set of rules that facilitate an efficient review process and result in buildings that are appropriate for their context and environment. And there's some urgency in completing this project, since without objective design standards, local governments cannot deny a project due to a failure to meet subjective guidelines, that is, standards that are not objective as defined, as this could be in violation of the Housing Accountability Act. So what are objective standards? SB 330 provides a definition in the government code, which is on the screen in front of you. And what this means is that everyone who reads the standards should come away with the same understanding of what's required and what's meant. So for the most part, these are quantifiable standards that can be consistently interpreted by designers, reviewers, applicants, and approval bodies. For example, development standards are objective. When we say you may have a setback of 10 feet, everybody understands well, how 10 feet is measured and so on. Height requirements, density requirements, parking requirements are all clear and uniform. However, when we start talking about regulating the design of projects, it gets more complex, and that's where this project comes in. So what will the objective standards apply to? It'll apply to all new residential projects and additions or alterations to existing residential projects. And these include all single family residential if it is more than one unit. So a single home being built on a random lot somewhere in the city is not affected by the objective standards. All multifamily residential projects and all mixed use projects which are either vertically integrated or horizontally integrated, as long as they have 2/3 of a residential component. In terms of the project schedule, we have a 4-step process that we are in the relatively early stages too. We started with developing an understanding of the project, reviewed existing regulations, the Marina context, and identified issues and opportunities. These were summarized in the memorandum that's in the packet that you received. At the same time, we started our engagement with the public and stakeholders that we'll describe on the next slide. We presented this analysis and feedback to the Planning Commission in early March, and we are here in front of you today. The next step will be to start defining what the overall framework is and work with city staff to develop the draft standards themselves over the next few months. Once that's been complete, and the public draft has been released, we'll come back to both the Planning Commission and the City Council for your feedback. And then that feedback will be incorporated, and then the objective design standards will be ready for adoption later in the fall. Important to this whole approach is engaging with the community, staff, and stakeholders. And the goal behind this engagement is to, one, educate the community about the need for objective standards, to understand their priorities, and also to get an understanding of what are the drivers that affect development in the city of Marina, and how the design standards can actually address those and help create buildings that are more appropriate for the city. So in the first phase of engagement, we have created a project website and a public-facing fact sheet. The fact sheet is also in the packet that you received. We've worked with city staff to get their understanding of the issues regarding project review and other topics of interest. We have conducted 2 focus group meetings, the one with design professionals and the other with developers who typically are building residential projects in the city. We published a visual preference survey, and now we are checking in with the Planning Commission and with you today to get your feedback and report on our progress and findings. Alessandra will talk a little bit more about what we actually heard from the engagement process later on in the presentation. So a little bit more information about the survey. We ran the survey for about a month in the early part of this year, and then it was reopened to get additional responses last month. We publicized the survey to a range of local community groups. We had a splash page on the city's website. There were numerous emails and social media posts that went out. There were direct contacts with local churches and community groups, such as the Korean American Association, Center for Community Advocacy, Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, among others. And then physical flyers and outreach was done at the farmers market as well. The survey essentially showed 6 different buildings, and these are the images on the screen in front of you, and asked 2 questions about each building. And the questions were, how successful is this building in terms of its design quality? And then the second question was, what are the characteristics that make this building successful? And with that, we had 6 different characteristics that were listed, and the respondents could pick 3. They could also say they didn't think this building was successful, and that was one of the options. Alessandra will provide a brief review of the survey results later on in the presentation. But at this point, I will hand this over to her to talk about some of the analysis that we have completed so far. Alessandra?
Thank you, Simran.
Oops, thank you. Good evening. As Simran mentioned, I'm going to walk through our summary of existing conditions, issues, site analysis, and community feedback as it relates to the Objective Design Standards project. Our team conducted an analysis of existing conditions and current regulatory documents to get a better understanding of the existing design guidance in the city right now. And what we found is that the city of Marina does not always have a consistent objective design standards across its various regulatory documents. So right now, design standards and guidelines appear in the zoning code, in various specific plans and master plans, the general plan, and in additional documents such as the City of Marina design guidelines and standards for landscape, site and parking lot design, site lighting, and signs. And the content, structure, and level of clarity vary, presenting both the reviewers and the applicants with a challenging range of design consideration that's kind of broken up across multiple documents at the moment. So this project really presents an opportunity to pull together this disparate design guidance into one complete and comprehensive set of objective design standards that will cover a broader range of topic areas, including site planning, building design, open space, parking, landscaping, and lighting. We also conducted a site analysis to better understand the areas of the city where the objective standards will apply, typical zoning and parcel characteristics, and opportunity sites, which I will touch on briefly in the next few slides. Next. So as you can see here, the yellow areas show the residential and the mixed use areas of the city outside of specific and master plan areas. And so these are the areas where the objective design standards will apply. As you can see in the purple, a large portion of the city is governed by specific and master plans. And as Simran mentioned, they contain their own specific design guidance and are mostly built out at this point. Next slide. This next map shows the zoning for all the parcels where the ODS will apply. So as you can see, most of them are single family zoned parcels that are already built out and probably unlikely to redevelop in the short term. And there are a few multifamily parcels along Del Monte Boulevard and within Cypress Knolls. And then there is a large city-owned vacant parcel. You can see that in the purple. It's zoned for mixed use, and it's just south and east of Imogen Road and 6th Avenue. Next slide. Recognizing that the design standards will impact the work of design practitioners and applicants, as Simran mentioned, we spoke with staff and conducted 2 focus group meetings, one with designers and one with market rate and affordable housing developers, to really gain insights into the development environment and challenges in Marina, with particular emphasis on past and ongoing projects in the city. Conversations with city staff and local developers and designers suggest that a variety of architectural styles are currently presented in the city, which is in keeping with its diverse community and history. Topics such as site context, parking, building massing and articulation, and materiality emerged as areas where the regulations may need to be expanded and approved. And then there was also a general consensus among practitioners that the objective design standards shouldn't be overly prescriptive, but instead should allow for flexibility and creativity in design. Next slide. Lastly, the team analyzed recently built, approved, and pending residential projects in the city to understand how the current standards are being applied and gain some insights into the key design characteristics of each project, which included any concerns or sentiment from the public and decision makers that came up on these projects. Several themes emerged that also point towards key topic areas to focus on in the objective design standards, including building orientation and entries, and providing appropriate setbacks and transitions, both to the street and to neighboring development to provide privacy and solar access. We will also need to focus on building modulation and articulation, encouraging a diversity of colors and materials that are appropriate for Marina, especially given its climate, orientation and design of parking, and open space layout and design. Next slide. As Simran mentioned, we ran a community visual preference survey for a month and then reopened the survey in April. So at the end of that, we received a total of 118 survey responses. In terms of demographics, most of the survey respondents were residents between 35 to 55 years in age or older, and about half of the respondents have lived in the city for less than 5 years and half over 5 years. And then based on those responses, the topics or design characteristics rated most important to the community in order of importance were: first, architectural features such as windows, roof style and pitch, level of detail and articulation; then colors and materials; and massing and modulation such as recesses and projections of the building facade. And then orientation and placement of parking was also considered very important. And this survey represents just one subset of the variety of input being solicited for this project, but again, it suggests topics to focus on in the objective design standards. Next slide. So we presented all of this information to the Planning Commission on March 9th and received a number of thoughtful comments and suggestions. In terms of building design, there was some focus on the design of open spaces, and in particular that private open spaces should be designed with privacy in mind. Another topic that has come up in discussions with the Planning Commission and several council members has been community.
Alessandra, you're starting to cut out so that we can't understand everything. Looks like she also.
Oh.
Alessandra, you might turn your camera off because your voice is cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay, hopefully this will help. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay. In regards to the design review process, several commissioners noted that the current design guidelines and discretionary review of projects is too subjective at the moment and really leaves too much up to interpretation. So there seemed to be an appreciation that the new objective design standards and ministerial review of housing projects will really help improve the clarity and transparency into the review process, both for the developers and the general public, and that these changes will facilitate housing development in the city moving forward. And then lastly, we also heard from planning commissioners that it might be useful to gather additional input from the community on design, colors, and materials to inform the objective standards. And that concludes our presentation for this evening. So I want to turn it over to Guido and Allison.
Thank you, Alessandra.
So as Simran and Alessandra mentioned, we're really here. This is really just a check-in meeting and to kind of gauge the council's input on what we've heard. And we did want to focus the conversation on the two questions that are up on the screen. First off was, does the council agree that consolidating all the regulations in the zoning code is the pathway forward? as opposed to having a standalone objective standards document. And does the council agree that the following topics should be the focus of the draft standards? Modulation and articulation, building orientation and entries, setbacks and neighborhood transitions, open space layout and designs, character and culturally inclusive designs. So those are some of the key takeaways that we took away from the input we've received so far, and we just wanted to get some concurrence from the council tonight.
Thank you, Guido. I'm confused by the first question. I thought what we were doing tonight was a standalone ODS document. But can you tell us what we're really doing is instead of a standalone ODS document?
So there's two ways you can do objective standards. You can incorporate them into your zoning code, or you could have them as a standalone document that the council adopts.
And go ahead, sorry.
It probably makes sense to include it in the zoning code, but we just wanted to get some concurrence from the council on that.
Okay, do we have any guidance what it would look like to have a standalone document?
It would just be similar to how the design guidelines look now. It is a separate document that the council adopted in 2002. It probably makes sense moving forward to incorporate all that stuff into an ordinance so it's officially codified and easy a reference for applicants and designers.
Okay. Was Paul O'Hadi included in the outreach, the one that hasn't yet built the 56 unit approved apartment complex across from the post office?
I would have to check with Remy and Associates on that one.
Because he talked my ear off for about an hour on the phone once. And he seemed to have a lot of experience around the country and good points about specifically Marina's development process. It seemed like that would be the kind of person. And I know you did talk to people like that who have had recently approved projects, but there's two projects that were approved that haven't been built for whatever reason. His was one. Was the other owner of the apartment complex on Del Monte included in the process that hasn't been built, that 94 unit that we didn't like?
No, but we can certainly reach out to them if that's the desire of the council.
Okay, because I think the council would be interested in knowing why fairly large projects that have been approved have not been built. If there's a reason sort of related to what's tonight's material, where we put too many restrictions on them or whatever it might be, maybe the economy, but in Paul Awadi's case, it was city requirements that has not allowed him to develop. My last question is about trees. Long ago, I thought that one of the reasons we needed objective standards was because we might have desire to keep more trees than we could require with the old rules or the current rules. So are trees not involved here, or are they part of landscaping?
That's probably more of a tree ordinance update that this body actually just reconstituted the tree committee, and we've actually had a meeting already. If that's something the council wants on the work plan for the tree committee, that might be a better task for that committee than this project. So.
And okay, the reason I asked is because that 94 unit apartment complex on Del Monte Boulevard that we did not like, we couldn't do anything about the tree removal on it for this reason of AB 330, et cetera. So that's why I thought that if we had an objective design standard regarding trees, in the future, we might be able to have better say over trees on such projects. But what you're saying is no, it's really not part of tonight. It really needs to be wholly included in the tree ordinance consideration.
Yeah, I mean, this is more function and form of the building in terms of trees and how we mitigate for loss of trees and replacements. That's probably better for the tree committee to take up under their work plan. So.
Okay, so then what kind of landscaping considerations might be included in these standards?
In terms of the landscaping, potentially having a set landscaping strip, articulating how much of the setback would have landscaping. I'm sure Simran and Alessandra can give us some better examples, but less about landscaping, more about the function and form of the building.
Okay, so it wouldn't get into the details as far as native or drought resistant. It would be more functional, not so detailed.
Yeah, I don't know if we're really gonna get into native versus non for this. That's probably better in terms of how we, review overall, like I said, trees and landscaping within projects, but that probably would not be a focus of this project.
Okay, and then also in landscaping, water conservation, landscaping, guidelines would also not be part of this.
Yeah, that's probably better for our WELO ordinance that we've
Our which?
our water conservation, low water usage ordinance. It's the law that the state adopted in 2010.
Okay,
That the city, if it hasn't adopted it, became law January 1st, 2010.
okay,
And so that would probably be more appropriate for the WELO ordinance. So
okay. And were you gonna ask Simran and Alessandra if they had any additional?
yeah, if
comments
they had
on-
some concerns of landscaping stuff.
Alessandra or Simran, do you have any additional input regarding landscaping?
Yes, I'm trying to think through some examples. We usually include sometimes buffer standards, so landscaping, creating landscaping buffers between different types of development. Spacing of landscaping and size of landscaping, or minimum size of trees or plants, particularly for screening purposes. We have sometimes included some design standards for drought tolerant landscaping and minimizing turf in the past.
Okay, so is your intention that what you just said was already going to be included, or it's an option? What you just said, those 3 or 4 items could be included. Should we desire that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Alessandra.
Mhm.
Let's go to Mayor Pro Tem Christina Medina Dirksen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Alessandra and Simran, for your presentation. I do have a question, Guido, and possibly the team. This is, other cities must be going through very similar processes. Are we attending workshops? Are we keeping our ear to the ground? Do we have any red flags that other jurisdictions have encountered? Are we adopting some of the best practices in terms of this is a big ball of information and we don't want to be punitive. We want to be objective. So I'm just wondering, my first question has to do with that. What are we learning? What best practices are we coming to the table? Because while we do survey people, we're all kind of new to this and we don't want to be so untested, I would say.
Yeah, so this is the second time I've worked on objective standards. So I would say making it very clear what the council is and the whatever gets adopted is clear for the development community. We're not trying to be punitive, to your point. We're trying to just give clear guidance to help streamline development. That is the goal. Monterey is working on this. Pacific Grove is releasing an RFP for this. Multiple Bay Area cities have either worked on this or are currently adopting these. So we are within the standard deviation in terms of what other cities are doing. So.
Okay, so the answer is yes. I'm
We-
seeing a yes from
Yes,
Allison.
we are within the
Excellent.
norm to adopt these. So.
But is there anything that caused any red flags, or you're seeing could be potential red flags or contrary to state law?
Not at this
anything?
stage, no.
Okay.
If I could jump in with that, because like if we have a process, we're 100% complete, we're at the 1% of the process. So we're not even putting out objective design standards. Really tonight is just saying, here's our timeline. We have our firm on board. And this is some of our preliminary public feedback, but we haven't even started the design guideline process. And so as we move further on, we'll engage the council, planning commission, the community much more once we start actually developing the standards. So we haven't even started down that path yet.
I get that, but thank you very much. And then just an overview, really last end of the process. I know we're not there yet, but as an applicant, I come forward, I have to follow these new rules down to color palettes. We used to have an architectural review committee. Does that no longer come into play? What is anticipated for education and or appeal, if it's I'm just kind of wondering how it plays out at the end.
Yeah, so that decision has not been made about the DRB. That really is a decision for the council. We're really here focused on the objective standards, but to your point, if an applicant meets all of the standards with all the changes to state law, we're basically supposed to approve the project. So,
And what if the project is already in the works? So is there like a firm line, like if you were approved by the state, you're grandfathered into the old standards or?
yeah, so generally when you file an application, when the project is deemed complete by the city, then you would fall under the old rules. And that's done out of fairness to the applicant. It's not fair to an applicant if they file for a permit and then the city adopts regulations 9 months in and then changes the rules of the game. That's not that there's an equity, there's a fairness issue there. So if somebody were to file a permit and we deem it complete, then it would fall under the old rules. So that's generally how it's done for a planning department. So
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's go to Councilmember Biala.
I think Councilmember Fisher had her hand up before I did. Okay, first, I want to answer the question that you had up on the screen that you wanted us to look at. Could you put that back on, please?
sure. Simran is the one with the slide.
And by the way, this goes back to my perennial request that any presentations done at council be forwarded it to the council members because there is some new information on here. And this is the only way I can actually access it at this point. So on the first question, we have already the City of Marina design guidelines and standards. It's a very short document. And I understand that this was a standalone, but I think what I want to start first off with is that if we go through this ODS process, this chapter will grow by probably 20 times that. So it would be not just an 18-page little standalone document. I'm not so sure that it belongs in the zoning code, just my thought that this has been like this. And the reason why it's so important, I think we've been focusing on objective design standards. I understand the law. I understand why we have to have it. I understand that these become the criteria by which you cannot deny a project. However, in the previous renditions of this staff report, there's been 2 now, it very much was bleeding into subjective standards. And when we're trying to focus on objective design standards, the standards. And I want to say that with all the focus on standards, we have mixed up looking at standards and confusing it with the addition of subjective standards as well. But I want to say that subjective standards are so important. That's where the city gets to say beyond the minimum requirements, this is what our vision is for the city. This is what we would like to see. And so all the issues that previously were almost as though it was not something that we should discuss, that is culturally inclusive design. This last incorporation right here, character cultural inclusive design, that I'm happy to see that was not included in the previous staff reports. And I think that I have always thought, why do we not get to talk about culturally inclusive designs when we're talking about standards? Because you can pretty much take any cultural design and make it into a standard. So for example, Matt, could you put up, I wanted to show you examples of roofing, for example, that show culturally relevant designs that could you absolutely make into a standard. And I wanted to challenge someone here, whether it's the consultants or not, could you put these kinds of designs? One is an Asian inspired design. the first picture, could you make it into an objective design standard? The next one is a tutor. Could you put that also in? And if you scroll down. Oh, yeah.
I'm
And the other
sorry,
one is,
Councilmember Biala, we can't see what you're showing.
okay, well, they're different roof lines and some are Asian, some is a Tudor, some will be like an Adobe style where the roof is fairly flat. So prior to this, the staff reports almost implied that we should not consider culturally relevant designs. But I think when you go down, now this one has a different roof too, they are culturally inspired designs, but could not we put those in the design standards? Is that possible so that this is the way to incorporate these kinds of culturally relevant designs? This last one, and that's the Junsei Oaks. It has a variety of different roofings, but it's very typical in Asian inspired design. So is that possible to take these kinds of culturally relevant designs and make objective standards for them? That's my question.
We're not here to specify a specific design.
I understand
If-
that.
If we have a criteria that says have an open roof with an accessible path that is warm and inviting, obviously more specific language. However, an architect gets to that goal, then as long as it's objective and clear and meets the intent of state law,
Mhm.
then that's fine. So you can get to that, and that's why, designers and architects are very qualified to deal with this stuff. So
But
as
it's-
long as we have an objective standard that's very clear to understand,
Right.
however they get there, that's their business. So,
Right. And I'm not
So-
implying that we're suggesting any, but our objective design guidelines then have to be able to be defined to include such roofing, correct? We can make any of these, if you go down to, the previous ones, for example, as long as the objective design standards includes the possibility of this kind of roof versus this kind of roof versus the first one. That to me is the way we get to include culturally relevant designs in objective standards. Is that not possible?
once again, as
If
long
I
as it's a
may.
clear standard, then I think we're fine. And I'll let Simran and Alessandra further.
Yeah.
And before Simran, before you start, Simran, looking to turn it over to our city manager who has some input at this time.
Yeah, I have a thought with that. It's not that I think that we're going to try to develop objective standards that say you have to develop an Asian roof or you have to develop a Monterey roof or whatever. But I think as we go through the process, what we'll be clear on is we're going to develop objective standards that do not exclude the inclusivity that we're trying to do, so that someone, if they want to do a Spanish architecture roof or an Asian architecture roof or a Monterey, so that we aren't requiring a specific type, but we absolutely, as a standard, make sure that's very inclusive, so it would not exclude any of these different types that we're trying to do.
That is exactly what I'm trying to articulate. It's a little difficult, but in that way, because I think what we're getting is somehow when we talk about multicultural designs, that's not part of objective design standards. And I don't think that's true. So we can objectify any of these roof styles and then be able to include it. But we're not dictating at all. But we have to start off with the possibility that these are the designs that are different from one another and that we have to design standards for at a minimum. So, okay, that's very good. When the state puts out the regulations for objective design standards, they are not saying that we can't have design guidelines, correct?
The design guidelines are a little bit more on the subjective side.
Sure.
So we have, okay.
On that, no, they absolutely are not saying that we can't have design guidelines. And in fact, we would continue to want to have that. When Port Ord closed, it developed these really nice regional urban design guidelines And we would probably have design guidelines for landscaping and streetscape and a lot of other things. The difference is those would be guidelines that the city would adopt, but under state code, you can't require it. But as it goes through the process, when the applicant submits something, we could talk about it and say, okay, great, we have these design guidelines, please consider these. But as far as under state law, under the objective standards, someone could say, okay, yeah, I see those guidelines. No, I don't want to do it. I'm just going to follow your objective standards, and they have the ability to do that. But I think having guidelines still helps us as a city to be able to articulate some of our vision and things like that, even though it's not necessarily objective.
Exactly. So when we have that one chapter, it says guidelines and standards. I think that it's saying that both are important for the city. We can't just have minimal standards and then the developers develop only what they have done before and without any idea from us that we're a diverse community. We value differences. We honor that diversity. If we don't have that anywhere, then all we have is minimal standards. And that's what I'm trying to articulate here is that we do still have to work on guidelines for our city.
Happy?
Yes.
Would it be okay if Alessandra or Simran provided
Sure.
input before Lane?
Sure.
Alessandra or Simran, did you have something you wanted to speak to?
The only thing I would add to the issue of, well, firstly about design guidelines, the way I would suggest we deal with the issue of design guidelines is not necessarily to have a separate design guidelines document, although that's certainly one way one could address the topic, but it is to convey very clearly what the vision of the city is or what the intent of the city is in terms of establishing these design standards. So having a very expansive and broad and inclusive design styles that are built in the city can very clearly indicate that. And the way we would do it in the objective design standards is to ensure that the standards themselves don't exclude any of the examples that Councilmember Biala showed in the slideshow, but we don't require any specific style to be built. So we say we are not regulating an architectural style. What we do say is that whichever style you choose, you are authentic to it and true to it. And have an intent statement that the city would encourage the widest variety of and diversity of architectural styles that represent the diverse demographics of the city of Marina. And using intent statements across all the different standards that we have is a way for the city to ensure that what gets built meets the vision that you have for your city's development and its character.
Thank you. And I think we have evolved to that point because I don't feel that those points were highlighted enough. And in fact, the staff report this time is quite different from the last two. And I'm glad that we have taken out some things. I think there was references to Mediterranean craftsman style. We don't see that written in the staff report. It's very important that when we repeat a staff report that we know what's changed in the past. And so I'm kind of disappointed about not seeing the differences so that the public who has been now reading two previous staff reports wouldn't know. And I want to go back to what Alessandra showed in terms of the survey respondents. She had left out a very important graph on the racial breakup of the respondents. And could we have that on the screen, please?
Was it? I don't believe it was in the presentation.
No, and I think
check
that should be in the presentation.
Okay,
It's an extremely important factor about that survey. So if we could have it up.
Actually, I have it. I have the survey report up. I can upload. I can share that. Give me just 1 second.
That one, that was not shown in the previous presentation. And I want to call attention to this because this is a survey in which we're now saying that we are a very diverse community of 2/3 people of color. And this was the respondents, where the vast majority were white, not Hispanic respondents to the survey. So it really calls into question what kind of conclusions or what kind of validity this survey has in terms of the results and the summaries. And I'm going to stop at this point, but I do have more questions and comments, Mr. Mayor, but I think others folks should weigh in.
All right. Thank you, Kathy. Let's go to Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, consultants, for your presentation, and last week's Zoom meeting was very helpful. For tonight, I am very surprised about the two questions that staff would like us to, or would staff would like to limit us to. Why did we not receive those two questions in advance? And where is page 59 of the council packet? I've been flipping, trying to find it. And really, I spent a lot of time preparing. So I am really surprised about not having received this in advance. The goal is for all of us to get as good a document as possible. And to now suddenly are being asked a question that we are not experts. Staff and consultants are the experts. How do you expect us to make a good decision about the question, is it better to have a standalone document or to consolidate it in the zoning code? I don't know. I need more information. And so I'm very surprised about that and disappointed about that. So I do have some questions that I did prepare. And please time me if I go too long. Like Councilmember Biala also mentioned, the reports have been altered. It would have been really helpful to see a red line document to see what exactly, which sentences have been deleted, changed, or added. So can you tell us and the public what changes have been made? Or can somebody do that? I don't know. Thank you.
Eat into your time, council member. Did you want to finish your question? Then I can answer them all at once, or would you like me to answer now?
Yeah, maybe I can do one more,
Okay.
because you might be able to answer
Okay.
that one as well. Thank you. Yes, because as one example about the agreement in the staff report for the previous meeting, it states that the agreement with the consultants is to prepare objective design standards. And the staff report for today's meeting has changed this into to assist the city in developing objective design standards. Has the objective for the agreement been changed? And if so, which is the correct one? Yes, thank you all, because I'll do my other question probably later.
Into your time. So
Yes.
in terms of the two questions, yeah, we could have certainly shared that with the council. It was really just an effort to keep the discussion at a high level. In terms of the red line, we can certainly provide that to the council. And in terms of how the question was worded, once again, it's just really, we're here just as a check-in with the council. How it's worded is not particularly material. It's just, this is what we heard. Does the council agree? Yes, no, maybe so. And to give us some initial feedback so that we can come back with the draft guidelines and have something a little bit more concrete before we start working with the consultant to actually draft the guidelines. So.
Thank you. So yeah, I cannot make a decision tonight. I mean,
And tonight's not for decisions or actions. So
no,
it's
but even to answer that question, I mean, I hope that we get more information.
yeah. So tonight we'll do the best we can and give the best information feedback we can. Councilmember Rial, did you have something to follow up before we go to Councilmember McCarthy?
Oh, no, I want to do the second round, please.
All right, Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. So I think there's a reason why the California League of Cities sent us all an action alert a couple weeks ago, asking us to oppose the broadening of losing some of this local control. And so it's obviously a very controversial issue, and I sense the, kind of the element of people being upset on the dais. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that and say that I think that that's okay. And I really appreciate the comments that my fellow council members have made. And if I was a planner, I would probably lean towards wanting the objective standards because I think it makes it a little bit easier, but I'm not, right? I'm a city council member who has been elected to represent my constituents who appreciate the local control that living in a city provides. And so I just kind of want to put that out on the table as we have this discussion. My questions are, I'm really trying to understand why guidelines are so important to begin with. And this is a legitimate question. I mean, why not just say, developers, just present us with something. We know you're going to do good work. We're going to let the market dictate good projects because we know you want to sell something. Well, I mean, why have guidelines at all? We kind of talked about the state requiring something objective, but even before that, what was the intent of having some of these guidelines?
Are you saying pre-SB 330 or
Pre
now?
or even now? I mean, why?
And are you saying guidelines or objective standards? Those are two different things.
Objective standards.
Why? We're doing it because we're required by state law.
But we
And
could,
we have to give our applicants clear direction about what the form and function of buildings will look like moving forward.
well, I guess what I'm saying is we could say, developer, your development is going to be dictated by the market. No matter what you propose, we are going to accept it. But we're not. We're choosing to have some kind of standards. And I'm trying to understand how the city benefits from having those.
We benefit because then we're compliant with state law. We give clear direction and we would be implementing the will of the 31 housing bills that have been adopted, which is to streamline the process, give clear direction to customers and to,
If I can just add a little bit to that. So the objective design standards does still allow much more local control than if we did not have them. So if we do not adopt objective design standards, a developer can come in and the sky's the limit. So by, the draft standards that Remy and Associates will be producing are going to have a lot of site development requirements that the Planning Commission and the City Council have reviewed and, move forward for adoption. If we don't do any of that, we have no control at all. So it's not that objective design standards, it does make for a ministerial process for the developer. So it's a streamlined process once we have these standards adopted. But in the creation of the standards like we're doing right now, there's still, a lot of local control that the council and planning commission will be, putting forth as the drafts come to you guys.
Thank you. And it's not a trick question, although I know it sounds like one, but I guess what I'm getting at is local control is something that is good, right? I mean, we are not saying that local control is bad. We, as a council and as staff, we want that. Is that right? Or
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Essentially what the state did when they adopted Senate Bill 330, it's not that we're out of compliance, but the state said, look, cities, we're giving you an opportunity to exercise your local control, and you have the ability to adopt objective design standards. What they've said is under the law, under the SB 330, if you don't have objective design standards, a builder can come in and build a square box, no articulation, no different materials. And if we don't have objective design standards, we have to approve it. We have no ability to deny it. So the state said, look, we're going to give you the ability to exercise your local control, but here's the box you have to do it. You have to adopt these objective design standards. And that's the whole intent of this process, is to work with the community and figure out what are those objective standards that we want, while at the same time giving builders the flexibility that they may want to be able to design and build the projects that are that they're good at, that will meet the market, the standards and things like that.
thank you. Makes sense. Do I have time for a couple more, Mayor? Fellow council member asked a question about and I think it was Christina Medina, the entitlement process and how long when a project is entitled they have. Is that dictated by state law, local code, or both? Or
In terms of multifamily approvals,
right. So let's take the Del Monte project, for example. I think they had 2 years initially. Was that, did the city decide that was 2 years, or does the state say, no, you have to give a minimum 2 years?
so depending on if it's an SB 35 project, an SB 330 project, the Permit Streamlining Act, there's several different laws that dictate the process. That 2 years under these new standards probably would be a lot more streamlined. But yeah, there's multiple laws that impact kind of the development of, you know, kind of the processing time.
Okay.
So,
Um, my last question, I think for now is on the map, there were two things that stood out, and I asked staff this question in advance, but Cypress Knolls is been noted as requiring the objective design standards. Obviously, it's very nuanced, but we own that property, right? So I'm trying to figure out how that plays into this. It's a little bit interesting.
You're absolutely correct. Since we own it and we'll be going through that process. I'm assuming we will be adopting our own set of objective design standards for that project. And so we don't necessarily, from a community point of view, have to do something broad for that. Since we own it and we'll be laying out those standards, we can do that as part of that project.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the intent of the question there is just to ensure that we're maximizing local control over that project. And then the other map question is, I just noticed that the Hayes Circle was all included as multifamily, even the part that isn't owned by the Veterans Transition Center. And that was new to me. And I'm just wondering, have I always missed that? Or are we saying that for Cypress Knolls, we have to build multifamily in that spot? Or is that maybe a mistake on the map?
I can speak on that. There are actually two zoning districts. The VTC properties or the Hayes properties are multifamily. The larger Cypress Knolls is residential single family.
Okay.
So the map correctly shows two different zoning districts.
Okay, maybe I'm colorblind as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all I got.
All right. Following up to Cypress Knolls, can we do multifamily inside Cypress Knolls, or must it be single family residential? So is it zoned R1 or is it zoned R4?
Well, as we go through that process, I'm sure we'll be changing the zoning as we.
All right, what's the zone now?
It's R1 now, but the specific plan process the sky's the limit again. That's my favorite phrase for tonight. That process will change the general plan and the zoning potentially for the whole Cypress Knoll site.
Okay, I and others have more questions, and comments, but we've kind of already gotten away from our process. So let's go to Christina. Have you asked questions yet in this round robin? Okay, how about we stop now, because several of us have questions still or comments, but let's go to the public and come back to council later. Does anyone in person that will want to launch our public comment? Anyone here want to speak at the podium on this topic tonight? And press that to turn it on, the little button on the base.
Good evening. First time attending council meeting. My name is Young-Soo Oh from Korean community. I'm here to speak about the downtown design, but I got some answers today while listening or from more. And I just want to say something about the city of Marina. It's so unique. I think we should all know about that. There's no other city in the cities in county is like Marina, because this city is like a little United States or United Nations. It's got everything. In fact, like 2/3 of somebody mentioned about that population is of Marina is people of color. So we can keep that whatever you like next generation. We need I want to keep that pace, so like a downtown development or general plan, we need include the kind of all those ethnic groups, desires and stuff. I just want to say something else. A lot of my friends come to Marina because it's got some food that they can't buy from other cities like Salinas or Gonzales, but city of Marina has their stores and also the restaurants. and some other things. And then they all, my friends express about they are comfortable coming to Marina because very nice. So I'm hoping that you guys keep in that direction. And I like the leadership of Bruce Delgado and all the council members. Thank you.
Thank you. Young?
Something to the PowerPoint?
It's not going to crash our system, is it, George? You wouldn't be able to do that where I work.
Oh,
The federal government is very cautious about those sorts of things.
yeah, me too. Okay. I haven't started yet. Oh, okay. Okay, I'm ready to start. So I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Asian community. Yes, I'm Asian. And we don't want to be forgotten. We don't want to be marginalized, put on the periphery. And so I'm actually in support of the ODS and streamlining the process. But I'd like to have the Asian designs mentioned. Okay, we could go ahead and show those now. So we'd like to, and these are subtle Asian designs. I mean, looking at it, you wouldn't think, oh, that's not Asian, but it is. Look at the roof lines and the balcony up above the garage. Next slide. That was beautiful. Roof lines like that. So, and go ahead and just keep on doing this. So that was, there's roof lines like that too. Beautiful, beautiful designs. Garden scape like that. And in the Asian, all the Asian communities, commonalities, aside from the roof lines, would be a lot of woodwork. And we could use real wood or fake wood that looks like wood. And we want to be included in the community because the Asians are part of America. And so we don't want to be forgotten. And so I want to just lend our voice to this process. I know we're just starting this out, but and when we come back for community decisions, we'll be there as well, and strongly there. So yeah, I'm for the ODS and the streamlined designs. I like that, but I'd like the Asian designs to be part of the menu, along with all the others. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Anyone else wishing to speak tonight? In person, and then we'll go to the people online.
I'll just read it so it's faster. My name is Maria Dumo. I'm from the Asian community of Marina. I would like to see Asian architecture in the upcoming community design. We all know Marina is a unique city with 64% of different nationalities. Our city history comes from a very rich community consisting of Filipinos, Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, Indonesian, and many other cultures who came here many years ago. I also belong to the Filipino American Club. Our building was here long before the city of Marina was a city. My church, St. Jude Parish, is celebrating 60 years here in Marina this year. Our parish priest, Father Ronnie, is a Filipino, but he grew up in Spain. Therefore, he's also very close to the Spanish community. I attend the 10 a.m. Mass on Sunday, and we have many Filipino parishioners. The 12 noon Mass is dedicated to the Spanish community, and we also have Korean Masses and Middle East Masses celebrated in our church. As a former caregiver, I had the opportunity to travel around the world. I have always admired the many different architecture in the world. One I love the most is Singapore. They have different areas dedicated to many different cultures. They have Arabs area, they have Chinese, Chinatown, and many other cultures. I'm sure this did not happen by accident. They made the plan and made it happen. We live in a city that still has many areas of land that can be built into something special and unique, different from the many areas of Monterey County. We can be unique Asian and other culture design. It is in the planning and should be considered by the planning department. They had shown a lot of the design, and I'm sure you can find more design on the Google, Pinterest, and other places that we can adopt and improve, and we can call it our own. Thank you very much to all of you.
Thank you, May. Anyone else in person that wants to speak before we turn it over to the public online? Okay, let's go online to David Kong. Welcome, David.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good evening.
Okay, great. So I think a lot of these speakers and also Council Member Biala has already expressed some of the feelings that I already have. I just wanted to say that to please continue the reaching out to the public to get their input because especially that even though that survey that they did had 118 people, most of them were not Asian or other cultures, and to reach out and get more public input, and not to exclude any Asian designs, and not to exclude any designs in terms of if somebody's trying to build the homes or build stores or something like that. So I just want to keep it brief. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Let's go to Mia Nguyen. Good evening, Mia.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Mia, we can hear you.
Hi, oh, wonderful, thank you. I just want to provide input as well. I thank you to George for showing the slide deck of inspired Asian designs, and I find those very beautiful and modern. And so that's something definitely I would welcome in our city. And if it was offered to me, I probably would have picked that. And so, you know, we talk a lot about multicultural, and I feel like that's a word that's thrown out a lot, just, you know, so we have the opportunity to actually act on it and kind of develop our city to make it look multicultural, inclusive. And so I would hope that the city council takes that into consideration. And another thing is I was one of those, I believe 120 people who took the survey. I found it through Nextdoor app. And I just happened to stumble over it. And I was hoping that maybe in the future gathering of surveys that we get a larger population that can respond. And that's all I wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mia. Let's go to Jeff Markham. Welcome, Jeff. Jeff, you're probably trying to unmute. We're just waiting.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Go. Yes, good evening.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor Delgado, councilpersons and staff. I think it's important that we look at what problem SB 330 was actually trying to address, and that's namely that some cities and jurisdictions were using local ordinances and design standards to limit construction of much needed housing. And Marina is not one of those cities. We've approved the most housing of any city in the Monterey Bay area. We're likely to approve Marina Station and, God willing, Cypress Knolls at some time in the future. So what I would encourage council and staff to read the April 16th Mercury News article entitled, "Why Do All Apartment Buildings Look the Same?" And as they point out, they are ugly boxes with minimal articulations of some of the slides that you saw earlier showed. And the reason is the developers are being very cautious. One of the reasons that they point out was that the consultants that cities hire are not design experts and focus on conformance with SB 330, and they lead cities into very bland outcomes. If we're willing to have design standards that actually incorporate our very diverse community, what we have to do is come up with something as minimalist as we can to not restrict what we can do. I think we need to incorporate SB 330 into a broader design process. And if we want design diversity that honors our families, we should reconstitute the design review board and leverage their expertise. They, if they're constituted correctly, are the people that could actually come up with a vision. And let's not let this particular ordinance restrict us too much. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll give everyone who hasn't spoken a moment or two to raise their hand if you want to speak tonight. Let's go to Grace Silva Santilla. Welcome back, Grace.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I hope that as you move forward with this, you will be sure you have language that embraces diversity of architectural design, and that we will allow for the architectural firms to come in and create some real exciting projects within these areas that these ODSs will be a part of, given that we already Marina Station's already approved. The Dunes project has moved forward with a fairly set design standard out there. The downtown plan has some really good language about embracing diversity and architectural styles. Some years ago, when my husband and I decided to do an addition on our home, we knew that we wanted to replicate an arts and crafts style similar to what we have seen over in Carmel. We also knew that that approach was going to add a tremendous dollar factor to our addition, because we did not want it to look like a big box. And when people come and they compliment us about our house, we let them know that there was a price associated with that design. I think, as the previous speaker, Jeff, just said, we don't want the square boxes, but we also need to recognize that there are going to be cost limitations that I fear if we try to place too many restrictive design standards and specificity onto some projects, we're going to have a really hard time getting some infill development to happen. And that there are going to be those who are going to be willing to spend that extra dollar, my husband and myself, but I fear that the majority will not. And I just hope you'll keep this in mind, that we'll embrace diversity in the design standards that we welcome into the community, and that we aren't too restrictive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grace. Let's go to Denise Turley.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, something's been bothering me and I just want to say this. A design of a house doesn't have a race. We seem to be a little confused on that. Design of a house has features that are usually common to that design being named. the old Cape Cod houses on the East Coast were sometimes called salt boxes because they were shaped like a box of salt. What I would like to see in design standards is common sense. I do not want to be able to reach out my bedroom window and touch my neighbor's wall. My particular home, my bedroom window is less than 6 feet from my neighbor's front door. Unfortunately, for both of us, fortunately, I have excellent neighbors and they ask people to be quiet when coming to the front door or leaving the front door so they do not disturb us. They do not smoke there either, which is huge. So design standards, roofs that properly shed waters potentially into rain barrels, because we need to be doing that. And you will find that a design might have something in common with several different cultures. So that's great too. But common sense and some ability, since we're having to do shared walls and things like that, some ability to have that little bit of distance from the neighbor, make it a pleasant environment for both households. Thanks, folks. Good discussion. Good night.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, anyone else wishing to speak online who hasn't spoken yet? Please raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. Okay, we'll close public comment and come back to staff and council. Staff, were there any questions in public comment that you'd wish to answer? I didn't write any down. Okay, no questions from the public, but great comments. Thank you, everybody, for being here and being online. Really important input that you provided us and staff. So let's have another round robin with council, starting with Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Christina Medina Dirksen.
Thank you. Before you all leave, I want to say thank you to all of you, Mr. Powell, Mr. Soon, Young Soon, who came here. It's this, something sort of struck me that I wanted to comment on. Is it okay for a comment?
Now you can have it.
Yes, thank you. Did you have a question? Okay, sorry. I don't see these as a race element. This is cultures provide inspiration and a sense of place. So I very much appreciate this discussion. It's not meant to be divisive in any manner. We just go to wherever we love to travel, whether it's Singapore or to Rome or wherever it is, and you get a sense of place, even in our own country. If you go to the East Coast, the sense of permanency with the concrete will strike you and evoke something in you, versus going to Santa Barbara and you see palm trees, which should never be grown here. It evokes a sense of place. So with the statistic that I just heard of about 64% of our community being ethnic, or our history shows that we are a very special place. I very much appreciate this conversation and do not want to go down any sort of path that denotes any sort of racism elements to this. That's a whole nother discussion for perhaps this reimagining police and inclusion and diversity symposium happening in Seaside, because we all have to learn. So that being said, as my comment, I appreciate what's been presented. My question was to the map. If we take a look at the map that was up there, as far as giving us the specific plan, I don't know the page. I could probably pull it up. It was on my computer. That gave us a look at our city and where the various boundaries were for the specific plans. What struck me?
Simran's going to pull it up right now.
Okay,
It's up on the screen.
Thank you. If we look around the area of the library and Beach Road, where Walmart is, and the site that is, if we are ever so lucky to secure a bond for our development near the library. It kind of was silent there, and I wasn't quite sure whether it was within the local coastal plan and that same area over by the airport. So I was just kind of looking at what areas of town that were sort of silent in my mind. So if you will see the specific place that I'm talking about is okay.
Yeah, those properties are in the coastal zone. The Walmart property and where the car wash is now, that's in the coastal zone, as well as the Lock Padden Park and the library.
So what does that mean?
So the objective design standards will not apply in the coastal zone until we do an amendment to our local coastal program to add them into that.
So is that to say if we look at the property, for example, the Hampton Inn, that was within the local coastal zone?
The Hampton Inn specific property is actually not in the coastal zone. The coastal zone boundary in Marina goes like this. So the Hampton Inn's actually not in the coastal zone.
We'll have an offline conversation about that.
very
Help me
confusing.
understand this a little better. Okay, that was my question. And then the other one having to do with the reservation corridor before the yellow part. So it borders Yellow, Sea Haven, Master, and then do you see where I'm saying across from the UC Santa Cruz? It's silent there. What is
That's
that?
a city-owned property, I believe.
If I can chime in for a second, the areas that you see in gray are areas of the city that are zoned either public or commercial. So residential is not allowed there, and that's why the ODS would not apply.
Okay, then that opens the bigger question. So commercial properties are exempt from this?
Right. The objective design standards will not apply for commercial or industrial or public facility zoning, which I did want to point out earlier. We do still need design standards for, and we will continue to have our existing design standards for commercial, all the other zoning districts that the objective design standards will not apply in. We do still need to have design guidelines for those properties.
Allison, those include mixed use where residential is a third or less of the project.
Right. Mixed use where it's the smaller component of residential.
Aside from maybe financial, I'm not sure. Is there a reason why we're not doing them both in tandem? I know that that the state law requires the residential, but if we're silent on commercial and we get quote a big box, we have nothing to say about it, right?
No, it's converse to that. We will still keep our existing design guidelines for commercial development. It just won't be these objective design standards that we're working on now.
Okay, thank you for answering that. That's all I have at this second.
Okay, let's go to Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to mention for Speaker Jeff Markham that yes, I read the article in the San Jose Mercury and I shared it with a few people. But I think that the Brown Act prevents me from sharing with all council members. But it was an interesting article warning that, why do all buildings look alike if we have such strict standards? Then we will get that. So I like the article. And thank you for having mentioned that, Mr. Markham. Yes, I understand that the city needs the objective design standards. And I know that it's not an easy task. And this is even shown in the report, which still, most of it has been removed, but it still mentions, the goal is to ensure high quality building design. Well, earlier it has been said that that's one of the vague terminologies that we need to get rid of. So that shows how hard it is to make it really objective. Let me see. I do want to say a little bit more about the survey, which Councilmember Biala also already mentioned. As you know, Marina is a very diverse community with 2/3 of the residents are people of color, and almost 2/3 of the now 118 respondents of the survey have indicated to be white. So that's opposite. So that's my question is, what is the value of this not statistically valid survey? What do we do with it? I don't think.
Let's let the city manager answer that. Good question.
Yeah, it is in no way being represented as any type of statistical valid survey. All it is, it was one little check mark of going out to the public, doing a focus group, putting a survey out. So it's just one little piece of information, but it has no bearing at all on, I mean, it's such a small portion of the community. As we go through this whole process, that's where the community voices will be heard. So this is just strictly initial put out there, get a focus group. This is what survey said. That's all it is. There's nothing valid at all about it.
So saying in the staff report that this is what the community wants is not correct.
No, what it is it's a small focus group and those who responded to the survey. That's it.
So instead of saying the community, it should say the respondents. Okay, thank you. Then we agree on that, because I don't think it should have any value. It should not. We should not base any of the future choices on this.
Correct. It is just one piece of information that the consultants and the council and the public will look at. And that's all it is. It's just one little piece of information.
Thank you. Okay, so I do understand it's hard. I mean, I understand we need it. And I do have another question. I think one of the public comments was about, not wanting to be able to touch the neighbor's wall. Blah, blah. Don't we have the municipal code for that, for those standards? That's separate from design standards?
Correct. We do have.
Yes.
And so what the state law is, it's just saying that if you don't have objectives,
Yes.
the only analysis you can do on applications is objective standards. So if we have objective standards in place, those are fine.
Yes.
But this will be looking at everything in that design process.
Okay, but setbacks, etc. That's or different set. Anyway, okay, I understand. Thank you. So yeah, I would just like to end that. As I've mentioned before to the consultants, for me, it is very important to not exclude any designs. And that includes for me, styles that may not have even been designed yet at this moment. Architecture is, it changes what we think is beautiful today or what some people think is beautiful today, because you will never find a design that everybody thinks is beautiful. But anyway, this changes over time. So for me, it's very important to try not to exclude anything. So thank you for working on this, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's see. I want to follow up with a similar question to what you had earlier, and that is, how were the developers chosen for the focus group? And I got a little bit more feedback. There was mention of Eden House, which is for affordable housing, but we also have locally Chispa, and we also have Mid-Penn that have done culturally sensitive designs that are affordable. And so choosing who you ask questions to, and then also choosing what you ask of them too. If you don't ask about their multicultural designs, they may not say it. So I think when I heard May say about the intentionality of inclusion, it's not that we write things that are just making sure that we're not excluding anyone. We have to make that effort, that special effort to include people. And I think that's another point that our city manager made earlier. So that would be also how we get the opinions of the developers that were in previous reports. And it didn't mention multiculturalism. So, I know that we have asked before about who was included for those developers, and the good developers, even if we had only a limited amount of minimal objective standards, the good ones are going to want to know what Marina wants for our city. But in the event that we don't have those kind of developers, then we do need guidelines that go over and above. And in fact, in one of the articles I was reading about what was in the staff report about the different methodologies, I came up with this sentence, which I thought was great. It says a scorecard can also be used to incentivize development projects to provide exceptional design and include features beyond the bare minimum in exchange for additional bonuses as part of the entitlement. So again, there are ways if we put our heads together and really define these things and consider it at all levels, and I think we're going to be, we're going to have the kind of city in the future that we wish. If the consultants would want to comment about how the developers were chosen and what kind of questions that they were asked.
Actually, I think I would like Allison or Guido to answer the question because the city had reached out to the focus group participants.
All right, staff, would you like to answer? Would you like Alessandra?
Allison has more of the details, but we did try to reach out to several applicants who had done work previously within the city in the last 4 or 5 years, and just to do a broad, a cross section, as Lane mentioned, we did reach out to an affordable housing developer, the market rate, and once again,
it's just
these are really just check-ins, just to kind of gauge. It's not a statistically significant focus group. It's not a Gallup poll. It's really just a kind of a check-in. And as Lane mentioned, as we're developing these standards, just to get some initial input. We did reopen the survey after last week's meeting. We did get some additional diverse inputs from multiple groups. And we've done the best we can in terms of trying to reach out to people who are willing to fill out the survey. And, with the caveat that this stuff is super technical. This is not the general plan. This is super technical zoning standards. So it's kind of hard to get people to sometimes even fill this stuff out. So,
Sure. And I know it's really difficult because I think you were trying to get a hold of people's preferences on objective design standards. And then when I saw the comments from the people taking the survey, it was literally all over the board. I was surprised, and I'm not surprised actually, because the survey was so not targeted and so I think not defined. So we get comments like one person saying they want 20 to 30 story residential buildings. They want mixed use is too industrial. They feel craftsman style or Adobe style is more within our town, and pedestrian and bike amenities, build small condos with mixed use. Please pick designs that make sense for Marina, more landscaping, more trees. Modern style is lazy, boring, uninspired, and overdone. Single family homes are mediocre, derivative design, Spanish influence of multifamily housing, more space between houses. That's for Denise. Anyway, so that tells us that whatever our intent was for this survey, we somehow got lost, and we didn't want to talk about design, but here all these people are talking about design. So how is it that we're going to define what we want and make any kind of survey a valid one? And I want to ask if from all of the survey elements and the discussions, I'm not a professional, but I could probably identify all the things that we need to make in an objective design standards. Okay. And I just wrote down some, and you listed some on that one slide of what you're asking for the council to decide and agree on. But it's windows and roofing and trim and articulation, massing and modulation, building height, colors and materials, frontage and setbacks, parking, landscape, open space, porches and terraces, orientation to streets, block size and connectivity and gating. There's probably many more, but we didn't have to go out to the public, I don't think, to get that. I mean, surely if we looked at many different standards across the state, we could come up with this and probably more. These are the ones that just, in the context of the conversation I've gathered. And so rather than say we're going to assess that the public is going to tell us what is important to them. We are obligated, I think, to make standards for all of these, is my thought. Is that not correct?
No, you're absolutely correct. That's why we're paying these consultants $160,000. They're experts. And so that falls on them to help us develop those objective standards, and those things that you mentioned there are will definitely be a part of that discussion. And I think the surveys and the focus groups actually were very helpful, because what it tells us is our community is absolutely across the board. And so, if they all came back and they all said, we want 20-foot or 20-story high buildings, okay, that would tell us something. But I think it's really valid, or not valid, but it's important. It's across the board. We know that we have a lot of work to do. Our consultants have a lot of work to do on helping us to develop these important standards here.
Well, what I would like to see, and it looked like on the next steps, I would just prefer that it says something about us having study sessions, which I think is fine, but I want to be real focused. So not to provide an overview again of the issues and the opportunities presented in this memo and get direction from decisions makers that will shape the draft. I would really like to see a draft, and then we just dive into it and say, does this fit for us? I think we're at a place where if we just get the design standards that are being contemplated, and then we operate from that. I don't think we need to do much more than that. I mean, it's a huge job, and I hope that we plan it in phases so that, X number of elements we're tackling one session and then the next set and all of that. But I think it can be really done much more efficiently if the consultants get this list and start working with it. And then maybe limit our choices. Like, are you asking us which method that was listed in the staff report, which method to design, to define these standards? Is it this method that's better, or is it this method? I can talk to that, but I don't need to have any survey because we can get that from the consultants or our planning staff. And certainly not from the public, because I think they're looking at design and we're looking at standards. I don't think there's a way we can get to that.
Okay, Councilmember Biala, let's get some feedback on your comments just now from either staff and or the consultants, and then we'll go on to someone else and come back if you have more.
Yes.
And I could answer that really quickly. You're absolutely correct. I think in our next meeting is not going to be a meeting and say, okay, help us put this together. This is again why we've hired the consultants. The next time we meet, they are going to have developed some initial objective standards on a lot of those criteria that you had. So that will be our next meeting. Is we will have some concrete points to look at, because there's not a lot of value just to meet again like this and say, okay, what do we think, public? What do you think? We're ready to have the consultants engage. And again, if that survey is helpful, because our consultants now know wide across the board. And so we don't have anything specific other than we've heard very clearly that we want designs that are inclusive for all different architectural types and are inclusive to all of our different cultures and populations. And that was an important piece of feedback for the consultants to hear.
And I just want to make one comment to add to that. On the list, the thing.
Can you wait? Oh, so we can abide by our round robin.
Oh, okay. Well, this has to do with that list. I want to add one thing there that was on that slide.
So hang on to that
Okay.
thought. Okay, let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councilmember Biala. I can tell that you've been doing your homework and have done a lot of research. And I think that both our recent experience on the Planning Commission kind of helps play into understanding how what we're deciding in regards to these guidelines really revolves around everything. It revolves around things that we've done with short-term rentals. So, things, nuisances like barking dogs, how we design yards, how, all of these things kind of have a huge impact on the quality of life for residents down the road. And I think we're all very aware of that. So I appreciate your comments. I just have a bunch of additional comments that aren't questions, but I too am disappointed about the design review board. And there's no more clear way that I can say that. I think that on our DRB, we had 2, maybe 3 architects that were providing basically free advice to the city. And we don't have that anymore. And I'm just hugely disappointed. I think that most cities in the region reconstituted their commissions and boards within months after COVID. And we're 3+ years and we've still not done anything. And, you know, I think that it's us sitting behind this dais that is ultimately responsible for that. And it hurts. And I don't think we should be here having this discussion today. I also am concerned about the Del Monte project. As you might know, the Planning Commission recently extended their entitlements for 2 years. I don't know, it seems a little bit long to me. I think HCD's guidance suggests a 1-year time frame. If for some reason we can get these objective guidelines done in a year, you know, and they still haven't broke ground, we could maybe impact this design that, as the mayor said, that most of us really didn't care for, that we thought could be improved. I do ask myself in regards to the 2 questions, what option provides us the maximum flexibility, especially for adapting and being resilient to be able to change these objective standards as time goes on, because we're not possibly going to be able to know everything today that we're going to need to know tomorrow. So spoiler alert, I think the answer to both of those questions for me is probably a no. At this point, I'm really trying to get to a yes, but I can't get there. Regardless of what direction we go in, I would like this body to consider a sunset provision that when the state law ceases, that our guidance automatically ceases, because we know how long it takes for the city to go back and repeal ordinances and laws. And so if that's the direction we want to go in, I think now is the time to put that language into a future ordinance. You know, SB 35 came out in 2017. That was over 5 years ago. So we knew that we needed to develop objective guidelines in 2017. And here we are, 2023, still talking about this. And I know a lot of cities are in this boat. I'm not criticizing staff. I'm not criticizing this body. But I think we're going to have to decide what our priorities are. And, you know, I think we've done that by waiting to 2023 to really start addressing these. And that's a concern of mine. And one that I've echoed kind of all along on the Planning Commission and will echo again today. Again, I guess to conclude, and the answer to both of the questions for me is no. I think that we would be better served by having a separate document that incorporates all of these guidelines, one that is automatically sunsetted at the time when the state law ceases to exist. Yeah, I think that as a city, we've actually done a pretty good job of welcoming development in the city. Now, we can't control what pencils out and what doesn't, right? We don't control the finances of our developers, but I'd like to think, and I understand that some might disagree, that we've done a pretty good job, especially relative to our neighbors. And so I think we should continue to do that. I certainly understand the intent of these guidelines and what it is supposed to accomplish for cities, and I'm very cognizant of that. And I think we all should be. We should be doing things that continue to encourage development. But if anybody thinks that we're not doing that, I'd love to have that discussion, because I'm not seeing it. So I think those are my comments for tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Staff worked really hard to get input on this and other projects. That their plate is pretty full. You know, they're trying to get Cypress Knolls and downtown vitalization and this project and probably others. They're trying to get public input from a diverse, diverse array of our community, and it's really hard. And if you look at our staff, they're mostly white, and it's hard for white people to be trusted, comfortable, et cetera, in the eyes of multi-races. They just can't be those other cultures. They're not. When the Waste Management District hired Felipe, I continue to get employees of that organization saying, thank you for hiring Felipe. But that organization has about 130 employees, and they're like 85% Hispanic, Spanish speaking. So it was more important for them to have a general manager that could speak their language. But by speaking their language, they're able to come out more and provide their input because they feel more comfortable. And so we can't change the color of our skin. So I think that this problem we have of not getting diverse feedback is not just this project. It's been going on for many years. And so I think we would need to hire consultants of different cultures to reach out to the focused populations of different cultures who can speak their language. And that's not easy, but we spend 9 million fighting Cal-Am. We could probably spend, $100,000 or $200,000 if we're serious about the product that we want to be representative of the input from our community. So I think we probably just need to spend more money to get different people of different communities to reach out to our different communities. Kathy's done a great job. She probably has everything to do with 5 Asians showing up tonight, but she's Asian and she's been working with them for years to try to get them to be more public, more public. And it's not hard. So she spent a lot of hours, a lot of days doing that. And it showed tonight, right? But our staff can't be there for every culture in our city the way that Kathy has been there for the Asian cultures. But I'm really glad they were here tonight. Paul Owadi, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, wasn't contacted, but he has problems with our process. And he might be, is he a person of color? I don't know. The name suggests that he might be, but is he?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've only talked to Paul on the phone. So,
Yeah, Mideastern.
so
So it would be helpful if we reached out to Paul and got his input.
absolutely.
If you have a lot of time during a certain day, because it'll probably take you a lot of time. And I want to ask staff a kind of a hypothetical question, and Grace touched on it also. Does exciting and does articulation equal higher priced homes and higher costs?
Not necessarily, but Simran's a trained architect. She can speak to that better than I can. So,
All right, Simran, all those beautiful pictures we saw with Asian design, to me, that spoke costly homes.
So, design can cost a lot, and it depends on a lot of different things. The examples that were shown for the single family homes, which had the Asian theme, some of those were expensive, I would say, expensive features. In other cases, you can do the same thing in a more economic manner as well. The implementation depends on the individual architect and the developer or builder who's actually building the project. In the larger scheme of things, especially as it relates to multifamily buildings and design, the objective design standards do not necessarily mean that buildings will be more expensive. Some elements of objective design standards may mean more cost, but most or many of the standards I would venture to say, be cost neutral. The goal of the objective design standards is to create buildings that have human scale elements, so that a person who experiences the buildings as they walk by has an experience where they can actually relate to the building, and it creates a good interface with the pedestrians passing by and the surrounding development. And a lot of the features can be achieved regardless in a fairly economical manner. Affordable housing projects, especially 100% affordable housing projects, often cost more than market rate housing because of the various labor requirements and the way their financing works and so on. So, design standards and the requirements for some of these features are not necessarily as impactful on cost as other things such as labor can be.
Okay, thank you. I think I've kind of gone my 5 minutes, so let's continue with Mayor Pro Tem Erickson.
Thank you. A comment just following up on what the mayor said. I hope the comments weren't to make anybody uncomfortable as to if you are white, you can't understand another culture. That's not what he meant. I think what he meant is if you look up here, we're all very diverse, and I've offered services in Spanish, and I love talking to people in Spanish because they feel part of our processes. So not everybody speaks the same language. And when you ask them in their language, there's a little certain connection that happens and they feel part of it and tend to be more engaged. So I just wanted to, if anybody had any feelings about his strong words about, it's not to say that people, white people don't, can understand. We're all professionals, so we understand. But the point is just being that we up here are extremely reflective of our community. And we all have very strong points that we can bring and people we adore bringing into the fold. So I think that conversation more is along the lines of as wide that we can cast, whether it's language, whether it's cultural connections, whatever it is, it brings more people engaged and there's more voices. So that's why we are a woman from Europe, from she's Dutch, she's Dutch. We're just such a special community here. So I just wanted to buffer if anybody felt offended by a comment that in other communities would really go over harshly. I just wanted to make it clear that we are very reflective of our community. And again, if I could offer my services to you, Allison, or anybody on our staff to get out there at one of these events, and maybe the farmers market carries a certain demographic that doesn't carry over, and maybe there's another place that we can be, I'm all yours.
Thank you. I'm really glad you said that. Because we're working really, really, really hard to try to find volunteers and even people we can pay to do simultaneous translation for us. Specifically to the mayor's comment, we are asking our planning commissioners, Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Walton, to come sit at the farmers market table with us for this exact same reason. We totally recognize, we're sitting at the farmers market trying to engage with people who don't feel compelled to talk to us. So we're definitely, I'm emailing and I don't have the contacts in the city that you all have. So if
Right.
you have
That's
people, please send them my
That's what I
way.
was going to say. But let us know because sometimes
Yeah.
the farmers market might gravitate to a certain demographic or a certain regular, but there's other things. There's churches, there's community groups, there's picnics in the park. Just go to our parks on the weekends. You're going to get a whole new, we just have to look at things a little differently.
Yep.
Again, I'm all yours.
Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I want to say thank you for your comments earlier. I think it takes a little courage to sometimes speak some truths that are not, have the risk of not being well received. And I appreciate that. And I want to also add in an example, a personal example, so that we all understand why we keep talking about diversity, equity, inclusion. It's a overused term now, but it has exceptionally important messaging underneath all of that. And I want to say about outreach, you also can lean on me too, because we've done so much with the Asian community. And, I know you're working very hard to get those folks, and it's just difficult. When we did a appendix for the Appendix A, we got 381 signatures, mostly Asians from Marina, and it was a mixed group still, but there is a way. So we can't judge our outreach on our effort. It has to be only judged by, were you successful in getting as close to 2/3 respondents on any kind of valid survey? So, I think that Lisbeth and I were at the farmers market, every weekend and for 4 hours. So, I think that we can help, with that as well. So please, and sometimes it's not just the language, because I've had this experience where I have an Asian face. I don't speak even Japanese well. And I will say the same thing to an Asian person who doesn't speak English. And they listening to somebody else and they don't understand them. And then they look at me, I say the exact same thing and they understand me. So there's something about that is kind of a little intangible. So you just might, and you can say, well, that doesn't seem fair, just because you have a face that is more like them. But that's the reality, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. So could I have my one little picture, please? And this is a very personal story, but I think it says why we have put so much effort into ensuring that diversity is represented here. And I received this photo by text from my middle son, who is Asian, and his wife is Mexican American, and they moved to Indiana. And they just moved back, about 9 months ago. And when they went to Indiana, they didn't have children at the time, but so they're walking around their neighborhood, and they quite frankly were unused to being in such a conservative state. So they're walking around, and he sends me this photo, and I'm looking at it, and I said, "Wow, you discovered that? Just on your average walk in their neighborhood, they were." And so I called my son, and I said, "So Rob, why did you? What struck you about this photo?" And there's silence at the other end, and he said, "We felt safe." Now, this is a small symbol out of nowhere. There's not even a garden anywhere. Maybe you can consider that rock, but there's nothing around it. But that symbolism of inclusion made them feel safe, made them feel like somebody in this neighborhood accepts differences, honors and welcomes people who are different. And so that's the kind of symbolism that is so important. And when I look at the Martin Luther King Jr. statue, I'm not African American, but it says the same exact thing for me, that this little discovery in Indiana for my children. And so that's why visibility wherever we can, however small it is really important. And I don't think, no matter how much we push this tonight or how many appendixes we have, the developers themselves may not be familiar with building anything multicultural. So the chances of us getting 20 is not a possibility, I don't think, because we have to look at who is developing these things. Unless we say in our documents that, Marina really values diversity. So could you please think about it? That's what guidelines are about. And without that, there will be no recognition. We're not, even if we were totally talking about this every day, it's just not going to happen. So we be strong about it so that maybe 1 out of 40 might consider a diverse design. And I say that with a very realistic eye to these kinds of issues. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My comments will be not as eloquent as Councilmember Biala's, but I also would like to offer my help. When I was running my campaign, I thought, it would be great if the city could have a table at the farmers market for whatever is going on at that moment, and we could take turn helping men, women, the table. And so yes, and unlike Councilmember Biala, I do like to take a small lunch break in those 4 hours, but she just keeps on going. But it's so, I always enjoyed it being there for the Just Water table, because you meet so many different people. And even if you don't speak their language, we had all those small, information sheets in 5 languages plus English. I even got to meet a Dutch resident from Marina that I had never met before, but they recognized my accent. So anyway, I definitely would like to help with reaching out to our very diverse residents. So thank you all for working on this. I know that we'll get to a good result in the end.
Well, if I was staff, I'd be really frustrated because they've worked really hard. I think in the past, they've made it known that we're welcome to help them. But for them to get our help at the time it's needed is really difficult. I mean, they sometimes can't even get us to respond to emails. So to get us, including myself, so to get us to show up at a farmer's market with them at a prescribed time, and the farmer's market itself is no silver bullet. I mean, it's the same people coming a lot every week, and most people don't want to talk. They want to shop. Even if you're the same color and you speak the same language, most people don't want to stop. They're not there to get involved with what they see as politics or some strange, vague, policy matter. And so the farmers market, and I don't know there is a silver bullet place, but I think it's going to take a scheduling effort to get the city council people to the extent that we're available, make ourselves available. But it's also going to take money to pay consultants to go to churches, et cetera. And we're going to have the same problem with community Cypress Knolls. I'm sorry, Cypress Knolls. Everything we do, we always want more diverse input, and we rarely ever get it. Kathy got it with the downtown vitalization appendix because she worked really hard to get it. And she personally went around and got petitions or signatures and things like that. Staff can't do that, but maybe consultants can if we spend enough money. So I hate to say that money is always the answer, but in this case, I think money is the answer if we expect to really solve the issue of getting that survey to look like, our demographics. But, that has to come out in the budget process where we set our priorities. And Councilmember McCarthy mentioned it's been since 6 years ago. Why hasn't this been a priority? This hasn't been a priority because the community during our priority sessions doesn't tell us it's priority. They tell us a lot of other things are priority. So when we look at all of our potential priorities, objective design standards has never been a very popular, as you can imagine, it wouldn't be. I mean, the fire folks want more for fire and et cetera. So we've had a lot of prioritization discussion, and it's never been objective design standards way up at the top. So it doesn't get much attention. And so now we are 6 years later, only because staff is bringing it to us, not because we demanded it or asked them to, and not because the public demanded it, but because they cite it as important. So everything we're doing here tonight is because of staff seeing that it's time. I've had a couple of questions for staff. Is it too late for folks like Paul Ohadi to get involved in this process? Are you ready to move on from this public input process?
Yeah, this was really just a check-in. If we can get additional inputs, that's fine.
Okay. Could we dictate that one of the following designs are highly encouraged and give them a Pueblo, an Asian, we saw several designs. So in our objective design standards, can we say that one of the following 8 are strongly encouraged, or is that
I think we've heard loud and clear about the culturally inclusive spaces.
So my question is, how much can we dictate, or can we just say that we strongly encourage one of the following 8 or 10?
Yeah, I think we've heard loud and clear about, having culturally inclusive spaces. I don't know. And I'd have to look on the agenda in terms of how we presented it. It was really just kind of a check-in, and we've heard that loud and clear. So I don't know if we necessarily need that.
Right. So I'm asking you,
So
based on your knowledge of SB 330 and objective design law. Go ahead. Did someone want to jump in?
Simran was going to say something.
So how much right do we have to infuse in these objective design standards specifics like multicultural dictates or encouragements?
I'm going to let Simran and Alessandra answer that, but we've heard loud and clear what the goal is, and we don't necessarily need a motion or anything tonight.
So I'm just looking for an answer to the question.
If I may, so the city can strongly encourage certain designs. Cities like Santa Barbara require one specific design because that's what their aesthetic is, but that's not Marina, and a single design or architectural style is not what I don't believe you're asking for a single architectural style. What I've heard tonight and what we have heard through the process so far is that there are a variety of architectural styles that represent the diversity of Marina, and all those styles should be strongly encouraged and not limited to just a few that an outside developer might come in and want to build. We can include that desire in the objective design standards, but it would be encouraging, something that encourages it, not necessarily requires it, because a requirement may actually become limiting. If we say these are the 8 styles or whatever number is that are required, then anything that doesn't fall on that list is not allowed. And I think that would be I don't think that's the intent of wanting to encourage the maximum diversity in the city, in terms of architectural styles that I've heard tonight.
And further,
Well-
you would have to be very, very specifically and objectively define what you mean by that list of styles and what's included.
That's right.
Have you seen any precedent, Alessandra, of another city objectively specifying cultural designs?
Well, Santa Barbara has they have a draft document out right now, which is about 300 pages, where each and every element of a building, including in terms of, the 1/4 inch dimension of a scupper or a downward spout of a rain spout, those are very, very detailed design guidelines, and they are really only addressing a single architectural style for the most part. I think that would be a very massive undertaking for the city to do that for multiple architectural styles here, and I would strongly recommend against doing so.
And I think further, it sounds like from what we've been hearing, people want to encourage flexibility and creativity in design, and being that prescriptive kind of actually makes it harder and discourages some of that flexibility and creativity.
The downtown plan. So to try to bridge the two thoughts, we're going to be bringing that to the council in short order. But there are appendices to the document that encourage that inclusivity. Additionally, we've thought a lot, pretty hard in terms of as Lane mentioned, that we still have these guidelines that are subjective in nature, but do kind of encourage applicants in a particular direction, right? And so that's part of our role as planners of, what is the subjective standards, but what are some things we could potentially encourage applicants to do, right? So that's our role as staff. So.
Okay, I'm going to pass it back to Councilmember Biala, but I think I'd rather risk dictating that you have to do one of X designs, you have to do one of 12 or 15 designs, than not dictate, because if we only encourage, then the typical developer who's coming from a typical background is going to say, oh, that's nice, you encourage that. I'm going to do what I've done in the past. And we get none of the 12 or 15 designs. But if we can try to think out of the box, what are all the designs we might like, and then require one of those to be the choice, up to the choice, then we'll get this multicultural product. But if we only encourage, we might get zero multicultural product, like you mentioned, 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 40. But if we can limit ourselves to 12 or 15, which is not very limiting at all, then I think we'd end up with more design, beauty. But I'm going to turn it back to Councilmember Biala.
Yes, and along those, I think we talked about not just that we want to be sure that we don't exclude things, but that intentionality of inclusion. And so however we think we can push a little bit more than just leaving it completely optional, even if they don't choose 1 out of 12 or whatever, then at least they're looking at it and they're seeing what we might be thinking about. So just to stretch how we can do this, because I just know it's everything that has no label to it and is just completely optional will never get looked at. So I think, our planning department can probably figure out some kind of unique way.
But once again, right, there is that balancing act of, as Alessandra mentioned, of being too prescriptive with also having flexibility. It's also meeting the overall intent of this project, which is to give clear direction to applicants.
Sure.
Right. So all of that has to be
Right.
kind of balanced, right? So
But you have to know, let's just take the roofs again. You have to know what an Asian roof looks like in order to build the objective design standard for it, correct? And you can't just say, well, we got to have 300 pages before we can define it. I don't think that we need to go that direction, but we have to, at least in a general way, make sure that we're including those elements into an objective design for a roof. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything else. It could be just a roof and some other materials or something that connotes some kind of different cultural design is what I'm thinking. And I listed off all these things previously about what I could hear from the discussions and what already the staff put on that last page of the requests of what we were, the goal today. If you could put that up again. And I would really like that page because I don't have any copy of it. It's just on the screen. But that last one was wonderful to see that. That was not part of any of the other previous staff reports. So there again, it's just wonderful to see that that is part of the list. And the ones that I listed, maybe half of them were included on here, but then there were so many other ones, you know, that seem to be trying to be articulated in the survey too. So, you know, windows or whatever, you know, so I think we just need that expansive list somehow. I think that might be it for me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm finished.
All right. Cypress Knolls came up because we own it. So is it true that we can have basically whatever subjective standards we want at Cypress Knolls?
Yes,
Okay. All right.
because the state law, it's all about when an applicant comes through the process. The standard we have to review it is objective standards, but in the city's Cypress Knolls, we're the applicant, so we control that whole process from start to finish.
Okay. Does staff know why Del Monte project hasn't been built, or would it help for staff? Would staff be willing to contact them as well as the Paul Owadi?
That project is in the process of getting building permits, so I don't know if it necessarily would be subjected to these rules. They
Right, I
have
was just
some,
wondering if they
yeah.
might provide some input.
Absolutely, yeah, we can certainly reach
into
out.
What we're talking about.
Absolutely, but in terms of being required to
Right,
follow.
no,
yeah,
I wasn't talking, no, I wasn't,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
that. Just
So,
getting their ideas. about
absolutely.
What
We
worked,
can-
what didn't work
We can
in
certainly
the
follow up.
context of tonight's.
Absolutely,
centers.
absolutely, we can follow up.
Okay, I want to go back to trees and I want to go back to landscaping. If because of 330, we don't have the right to dictate what trees they keep, and we're limited to our ordinance of how many little trees they have to replace with the big trees they take down. I want to ask, is there more we can do with objective standards? Like, it could an objective standard be if there's any tree larger than X diameter at breast height, you can't cut it down? Or, you know, is there something more we could do to keep our trees, especially the larger ones,
Yeah,
with these
so-
objective standards?
Absolutely. So anything the council wants to do to help things clearer on any part of the code, sign ordinance, trees, I mean, those are the two that come to mind. Anything that we can do to enhance our ordinances and make them more clear is very much appreciated by staff and applicants. So, but once again, that's probably better more for the tree committee that just got reconstituted. So.
Okay.
But on something like that, yes, they could be part of it, but I think what Guido was saying earlier, the really appropriate place to do it is to amend our tree ordinance or code, because again, this is going to be applicable to maybe a few lots in the city. We're spending a lot of time, we're doing a lot of discussion, because if you saw that one map we talked about the applicable areas, it was all residential homes. It's not applicable to a one unit residential home. So all the 95%, 98% of that area, it's not, these aren't going to be applied to it. And so if we really want to do something with trees, we need to amend the tree ordinance that's really applicable to the 95% of the community.
Right. And I would guess if we did it here for a minority of the properties, it would be like a copy and paste on the tree ordinance and vice versa. But I remember the frustration at Del Monte project where we had nothing to say about trees. We had nothing to say about parking. We had nothing to say about setbacks. Objective standards at the time were told to us as the savior. So here we are with the savior. And I thought I heard earlier, sorry, it's not the place for trees. but that was one of our frustrations. And so to the extent that trees can be dictated in these objective standards to help us keep our trees, especially our larger trees, that would be great, especially our oak trees. I mean, if we could be more specific about oak trees, because they have a little bit more value to us, being that they're our only native tree and they're so beautiful and they're so hard to grow that once we get a nice oak tree, you don't want to cut it down if at all possible. And then the landscaping buffers, I took enough time of our evening talking about that. I just want to say, I hope that when we come back, our objective standards have as much to say about turf components and drought tolerancy and landscaping buffers as possible, so that we're strong on landscaping, as strong as we can be in these objective design standards. And then I had a question. This is my last theme, my last question. High performance standards as far as passive home development. We talked about high performance standards with Cypress Knolls potentially being built so that it's affordable by design once you're in the place. You know, for the people that move into these potentially higher performance standard built homes, they have smaller utility bills and they have better health, better air. So it's better quality of living. And higher performance standards be part of our objective design standards.
They can, but that's probably better suited more for a REACH code or an update to the building code. We have heard from that one gentleman, Jay
Gentry.
So we've heard loud and clear in terms of the council gave direction about Cypress Knolls and making sure it's very eco-friendly and all that. But I don't know if because this is more the function and form of the building, less about kind of the use. I guess that's a little bit of a different.
So I thought I saw materials on the list. Wouldn't it be the materials that you use to help you get to the higher performance standards?
Yeah, but the stuff that when Jay's talked to me in my office, it's pretty detailed in terms of the HVAC system and all that other stuff that really within an objective standards project, I'm not sure if we could certainly take a look, but that's.
So I heard that Santa Barbara had 300 pages. They were down to the 1/4 inch. That's pretty specific. So if it's legal, then
we can. Yeah, we can certainly. Simran and Alessandra can chime in. So.
Yeah, if I may, the issue of HVAC systems and so on, those are the interior of a building, which the objective design standards would typically not regulate. That would be something that's in your building code. The green building code that the state has and City of Marina has adopted has a lot of standards already included in it, which address these issues. The city can, through other ordinances, adopt more stringent standards, but that would be citywide, and you wouldn't do it limited just for a portion of the city. You would want to do that across the cities.
Okay, so if we thought that the state mandated green building code was a minimum bar that we wanted to do much better, and it included your wall material, the kind of windows you use, structural components, and if we did this with citywide ordinance, would that citywide ordinance dictate what would happen in these design standard properties, the minority that our city manager talked about? Does the citywide ordinances have a control over these, or do you have to say the same? You have to be very specific here and in the city ordinance in order to affect these.
I think they're complementary to each other.
Yeah.
Sorry, Guido.
No, I was just trying to clarify. Are you saying does a enhanced green building ordinance apply throughout the city? Yes, with the exception of say Dune to Marina Station, those ones that have been vested, right?
For 330 influenced properties, if we have a citywide zone, a citywide ordinance that's not inside these design standards, does the citywide trump and force a developer to apply to comply, or do those standards have to be regurgitated inside of these objective design standards?
That would be a separate ordinance, and it would depend on how it's laid out in terms of by the council, in terms of is it applicable to these projects are not, I mean, it just depends on the policy direction the council goes, but.
Okay, so 330
Yeah.
projects have to comply with citywide ordinances that are outside of the objective design standards.
The building code,
Generally,
yes.
yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
I'm trying to figure out what you're asking, Mayor. Sorry, I'm just
I'm
trying to.
figure it out too. So if we had building standards that were higher citywide, then higher bar citywide than the state, the green building code, they would be required in these developments as well, these 330 developments.
Yes, with the caveat that if there's density bonus involved, and the attorney can speak to this.
Okay.
There are some nuance in terms of, does it prohibit the affordable unit? There's some, the answer is generally yes, but
Right.
there's some nuance to density
Now,
bonus.
does that nuance apply to everything we put in the objective design standards?
Yeah, density bonus concessions trump all of these objective standards,
Okay.
so.
So it's not unique to the building, your
Yeah.
green building codes
Yeah,
or
if,
the trees or anything
if an
else.
applicant applies for a density bonus and they get concessions and waivers and they are able to articulate that a specific objective standard prohibits the development of affordable units, they are by law allowed to get a waiver of a standard.
Okay.
So.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you. And I don't know what's included on this design guidelines and standards, but there is landscape guidelines and standards in here, so you might want to look at it. I have no idea what it says. Well, the whole thing is only 18 pages. Come on. So it's it should be readable. Do you know what I'm saying in that there is a few pages on landscape guidelines and standards in this.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
And just, since you're asking to include some other folks like Mr. Awadi, at Chispa, there's a Mr. Tron, Mid-Penn, they ask about their work in Salinas. I think they have been very culturally sensitive and affordable at the same time, these two local developers. So thank you.
We did speak with Mid-Penn, Councilmember Biala. They were a part of one of the focus groups we had.
Great. And were you able to talk to them about the multicultural designs? Because again, we have these resources, but depending on what you ask them, they may not talk about it. And so if that wasn't part of it, then from that focus group, you get the Mediterranean and craftsmen, not to say it again, but that's what I'm saying is not only who do we ask, but what we ask them is the answers that we get from them.
Yes,
Because I
so
know
our
they've done a lot of
discussion.
work. Yeah.
Yes, they've done a lot of work, and we spoke to them about design in general, and what we heard from them and also the other design professionals was the desire to not impose any stylistic requirements on any projects, because every site is different. The architects they're working with are different, and they suggested that they wanted flexibility in terms of the design and architecture styles that they chose for a particular site.
Right. But if they've already done it and, it's not asking them to create something completely new. So I know I understand what you're saying, but I also say that if they've done it before, why would they be unwilling to consider it again in the future? Depends on how the conversation goes, I think. Anyway, thank
Sure.
you.
Okay. I think Councilmember McCarthy is going to have the last word on this item tonight.
Thank you, Mayor. I wasn't going to mention the Santa Barbara ordinance, but I heard you mention it. And I think I'm glad you did, because I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, again, going back to what I said earlier, there's two extremes. We can have this 300, 400 page objective design guidelines. We could have a 10 page, right? Or somewhere in between. And I would just encourage my colleagues on the council to maybe, including myself, try to look at some of these more robust packages. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think it's our decision to make how robust we want ours to be. So I think we can learn a lot from reading some of these others. And the other thing I just want to say is that I think if I was, especially planning staff today, I'd probably leave feeling pretty beat up. And I think anytime we talk about these passionate issues, we're trying to articulate things that we're not experts in, and it's very difficult. As I meet with Lane on a regular basis, I often tell him how grateful I am of our very skilled staff, and I hope he's relaying that at least occasionally to the staff, but I just want to, through Lane, thank you for listening and really trying to decipher what we're saying, because I know we're not, or I will say I am not articulating as well as I could. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor. All right, let's go back to Councilmember Biala.
Because I feel like I've been one of the unspoken, the outspoken ones, I do want to apologize if you felt beat up, and I truly do recognize the planning staff's expertise. And I know you bring to the table amazing stuff. So I do apologize if you felt like I was beating you up, and I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I would just point out that there's a lot of diversity in this room, even if you don't see it. I'm 25% Mexican. My kids are Filipino. I'm very aware that part of the reason why I applied for this job was very diverse nature of this council and this community. So I'm very aware of kind of those multicultural issues, and we've heard what you've said. And we will definitely do a little bit more outreach and do it in a culturally inclusive way. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fisher?
So I might get the last word, Mr. Mayor. I would just like to echo that. So thank you for all you're doing. You are appreciated. And like I said, together we'll get to the best possible outcome thanks to your expertise guiding us. And as you now have discovered, please do not spring questions on me that I have not prepared for. Because I've done my homework, and to be surprised that was not the best method for me. So, but thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Sure. And on the culture, on the topic of race, some people are very comfortable with me, but there's many people who are not comfortable with me. They tend to be Asians who don't speak English. And so it's hard for me to communicate with them, and it's hard for us to meet, heart to heart. So if I ask them to take a survey, they're going to say no. They're going to try to walk past me because they don't want to approach that barrier that they know exists between us. They can tell by looking at me and how I speak that we're not going to have a very easy conversation, and they're there to shop or do whatever they're doing. So none of us can relate to all the people that need to be related to for this and these other projects. But we have this recurring theme of wanting more diverse input than we can get, and than we do get. And these postcards are all that we can do. And they're probably not going to succeed very well, because they're going to go in people's mailboxes and they're going to get tossed, or the husband's not going to tell the wife, or the child's not going to, it's really hard to get between people's ears, especially when you have a diverse culture. And that's why we had so many white people responding. They're used to being public. They're the superior, social identity. They tend to make more money. I mean, there's a pattern here that's over and over. We get white dominated feedback. And if we want to change that pattern, we have to do something extraordinary. And it's not to expect staff to do something extraordinary. We have to give staff extraordinary tools and extraordinary money to do something extraordinary, or we're just beating them over the head, telling them, do better, you're not succeeding. But we don't give them the tools to do that. So it's like Brian said, the buck stops at the dais. And if we don't give them the tools because we don't prioritize it, we can't expect them to produce a rabbit out of their hat. That has never happened in our city. We've never gotten the input we wanted. When we back in the late 90s and the early 2000s, when we had tours, buses for what's now become the Dunes, it was the University Villages. Those buses were filled with white people. And we had postcards just like this, and we had information going out in different languages, but the different languages didn't show up. And so this is a long-standing issue that's not going to be solved unless we do something different than we have in the past. All right. So does staff have everything we need to say we're done tonight on this topic? Okay.
We have clear direction. We understand. We will be meeting with the consultant to go over the comments. And as Lane mentioned, you'll probably have something a little bit more concrete before you. That seems to be maybe the better approach. And we will do our best.
And to the answer to those two questions, you might not have gotten 5.
It's fine. We heard loud and clear that we needed to give you guys a little bit more concrete stuff before we get those questions answered.
Okay.
So
I don't mind being sprung with questions, but we're all different.
That's fine. That's fine.
I know that you guys are working really hard, and in the last two days, you might come up with something you want to change in the staff report, and that's just the way it is, because you're rushing to get things ready for us sometimes. Okay, so we'll move on then to the pulled items from the consent. And there are 10F 2 and 3 and 4, and Brian or Lisbeth, you had several questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe I should have just said I had one for each because it's 3 questions.
Okay, so
That's
let's start. Let's go back to those. Let's talk about 10F2, which is the Cypress Cove Landscape Maintenance Assessment District.
Well, I can ask the questions for all 3. I can make them general questions. So my questions
Yes,
are.
Remember, we will have Edri De Los Santos. He is with us as well, and he works extensively with the landscape districts. So he'll probably be able to answer the question.
They're not that hard, I think. So they were pretty quick. So it says a maximum assessment for Prop 218 is an X amount per parcel. Is it not allowed to increase this for future years, even although the costs increase?
That's correct.
Oh, that.
Yeah, those are the maximum that can be charged.
So, and that cannot be increased over the years.
That, you're correct, that's at the maximum level. To go, you'd have to have another Prop 218 election where you have to log all the residents to vote on it, and they would probably kill the district. If you would
But-
have that election.
If the costs increase and the assessments do not increase, that goes wrong somewhere
That-
in the future.
But under Prop 218, they are at the maximum we can charge.
So, and Edri, I think there is a certain percentage that can go up for that cost to increase over time, but that is the limit. It doesn't allow you to go beyond that.
Correct.
So should we not increase it then with what's allowed
We are at the maximum.
already? Okay.
That's a lot.
Okay, well, thank you. And then my next question might also be, I might also not like the answer. Is enough money being reserved for future expenses to repair or replace irrigation? And as for Monterey Bay Estates, also streetlights?
Edri can jump in.
Yes. We could definitely talk about that at the public hearing that we're setting for May 16th. But the short answer would be for some districts like Monterey Bay Estates, we've had to do cost saving measures in order to have the balance ready for future maintenance issues. For other districts, we've tried the Prop 218 process, which hasn't worked, and have found other cost saving measures in order to make it work. So it has been difficult, and what you're saying is absolutely true. But in order to get the Prop 218 process through, as Lane brought out, oftentimes leads to the dissolution of districts. So the current process is find cost saving measures to keep the district going. And we could talk more about it at our public hearing. How we did
Can I
that.
ask one more thing? So if a district would get dissolved, I think it's that means that the city then needs to take care of the maintenance? Is that?
Correct.
There will be, all kinds of things that would have to be explored and how that would all shake out. But yeah, there's probably gonna have to be the city stepping in or something.
Because as you know, if I see streetlights, then I'm always red flags go up. We need money for streetlights. Because they're so expensive. If anything happens to them or if they need to be replaced. And if there's no money, then the city needs to budget for that, I think.
If that's the big picture question with these districts, because typically, like for our larger development areas, Sea Haven Dunes, they all have CFDs and landscape and lighting districts and HOAs that take care of all of that. Everything else in Marina typically don't is the general fund tax dollars, and so the level of maintenance and the level of the lighting and the quality of the maintenance, it's very different between these. And it's because if they are paying the board, they're paying additional tax dollars for it. These specific districts, when they went in, they again wanted a level of when the developer went in and built it, they said we want a different level of improvements there, and they sold it to the cities. We will pay for that, and so and some of these developments had some challenges. They had retaining walls and different things like that, and so that was the deal that was made. It was okay. City agreed to do it, and the developer, the property owners agreed to pay for that additional cost. And so you could go down that route and say, okay, so you do it, but then it's fair to other taxpayers say, okay, we're going to do this enhanced level of benefit that they were supposed to do, but now we're going to not charge them and put that on the back of all the other residents, the other citizens. So that's a big complicated discussion we have.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think money needs to be returned either from them or the city. Yeah.
What Edry does an excellent job is he looks at really the life safety type issues that are critical, and he tries to make sure that we have funds and reserves set up to address those critical life safety type things. And then maybe tries to make the dollars go as far as possible to make those aesthetic improvements that those districts want that are nicer than do it anywhere else in Marina.
Thank you. And I had one final question. Why is there no budget for supervision? Are there no inspections being performed to check the maintenance?
Sure. So the cost for administration and inspection is actually under line administrative services, including the engineer's report. So
Okay,
there's
because
the
at
contractor
one of
services.
the three, there was a line for supervision and it was 0. So, but it's included in the, say it is included. So
Yes,
there are inspections being done. The work is, okay. Thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so we're going to go to the public, even though it's not required. What's required is they have a chance to comment on consent items, which they already had. But because we pulled this, the public might be giving new information because we're delving into it. Our legal counsel is suggesting that we should, just to be nice, we should have public comment because the public is now inspired to comment. They've heard more than they would have if we didn't pull it. And so I think in the future, when we pull consent items like we did tonight, we should try to go through that same process of clarifying questions, go to the public, come back for other public council input question. So let's go to the public now, and then we'll come back to council for any final thoughts, and then we'll have a motion and a vote on this pulled item, and then we'll go through each of the other 2 items. Okay, so does anyone in the public wish to comment on this Cypress Grove Landscape Maintenance Assessment District? I'll just give you a moment in case you do. Okay, we'll close public comment, come back to city council. Any final comments before we make a motion? Would someone like to make a motion regarding Cypress Cove on 10F2? A motion that we adopt the resolution before us and do as the request is here on the agenda item.
My second.
All right, can we have a roll call vote, please? I'm so sorry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, that motion passes 5-0. We go to the similar issue with Seabreeze Landscape Maintenance Assessment District. Are there any questions from council? Okay, I'll assume there's no questions from the public on this. Well, I'll just ask. Anyone in the public wish to comment on this matter regarding Seabreeze Landscape Maintenance Assessment District? All right, seeing no hands, we'll come back to council. All in favor, can we have a motion here?
I motion.
What was the motion?
Adopt resolution receiving the fiscal report from 2023-24 engineers report for the Seabreeze Landscape Maintenance Assessment District, declaring its intention to levy an assessment in fiscal year 2023-24 in that district and calling a public hearing for May 16, 2020.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
A second.
Do you second it with the same enthusiasm that she recited the motion?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no. Okay, and then lastly, we have 10F4 regarding Monterey Bay Estates, similar matter. Does anyone have any questions or comments on this? Does anyone in the public wish to comment on this? Okay, I'll motion that we adopt the resolution before us and call for the public hearing on May 16th.
I'll second.
Okay, and do the other things that are listed here in the request on the staff report. We have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Medina Dirksen. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, please say no. All right, thank you, everybody. That passes. And Edry, thank you for sticking it out for this. And we probably, most of us know that Edry has been doing these landscaping districts for many years. And we appreciate that, Edry, all the 218 issues that you've dealt with. And it's been very controversial in the past. The last couple of years, there's not much controversy at all. Edry, why did the controversy go away? Well, we'll talk about that offline, but it used to be much more controversial. So that shows, Edry, you're doing a good job. Thank you. All right, we have a couple of housekeeping items sort of at the end here. The Mayor's Association was canceled, so it didn't meet last month. It meets this Friday, first Friday of every month. So let's go to 14B. And I think, Christina, you had some reports that you'd like to mention at meetings you've attended.
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope Edry is still with us. He gave a wonderful presentation about Measure X, $11 million allocated for the Engine Parkway expansion at my TAMSI meeting last week, I believe it was. I would like to see if we can't have that presentation for us. I don't think we've had it, but it was great showing the roundabouts, the bike lanes, the traffic calming measures. There will be some overnight nighttime work, sound walls, again, landscaping. Hopefully it's, I think I did mention that it be local, locally consistent with what we like, because they remove so many trees. So I think there is a landscaping plan there. So Edry did a great job despite some technical difficulties. The other thing was same meeting, TAMSI had a surf line, is planning a meeting of the surf line. The surf line is a bus, rapid bus between Marina, Palm and Del Monte here to Sand City. They plan to have an open house discussion on June 10th. And as soon as I find out here in town, as soon as I get some information on that, I will share it. And there is a 2026 target completion for that surf line. There was environmental permits that were moving forward. And as I had mentioned in the past, I would like to have us at least discuss that as a council, because there are going to be some decisions. And as your representative on TAMSI, I think we need to, things are moving full steam ahead, and we need to have as much information as possible to be able to share with our constituents, and as a body have consensus on how we feel about this, and if there's anything to add to it. That's all I have.
Christina, did they say if the Coastal Commission has approved it?
No.
Did they say what the status of the Coastal Commission involvement
They
was?
said they were moving forward with environmental permits.
And nobody asked about the Coastal Commission.
I had asked, they said there was a waiver of CEQA. And I'm trying to remember, I think the answer we got was moving forward with environmental permits. I did ask the question about why on the line itself versus on the side. A resident in my neighborhood talked to me about that, and the answer I got is because it would cause much more environmental damage and it would change the footprint of the plant. So that's why they will be in the same footprint of the railroad.
Right. In the future, can you ask about the Coastal Commission status?
I will. I did at the last meeting. I did bring it up because there was a letter from Mr. Salerno that was given at the night before, and I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. So the prior meeting, I did ask that. That's a good question. Where are we?
What did they say?
It hasn't been shown.
Okay.
So it's still going through.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two quick items. I I attended the mosquito district ribbon cutting for their new building out on Blanco Road. It was really neat. I've always heard about this mosquito district that seems to do so much, but I've never really understood. And, I have to say that with global warming and invasive species of mosquitoes that are more adapted to cold weather, we've always enjoyed not to live in an area where we can get bit by mosquitoes. We can have the door to our chambers open and not an issue. That's not promised to always be true. And so this organization really aims to look at some of those problems, and it's a service to all of us. And so if you see standing water, if you see areas that might be breeding mosquitoes, anyone is welcome to call the mosquito district, request an inspection. They'll come out and do abatement and work on that issue. So it was a really neat thing to go to the district offices and talk to some of the people and learn more about that. Nancy Amadeo, by the way, is still our representative on the mosquito district board. The second thing was, and maybe you were going to speak to it, the San Gilia meeting was a public meeting that was noticed, and our mayor had us on our hands and knees looking at San Gilia through little microscopes. And it was just a really unique experience to get to understand a plant that, quite frankly, I've talked about, several times, but never really seen up close and in person. So I really appreciated that opportunity, and it's just a real neat opportunity to understand the issues that revolve around San Gilia. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to Councilmember Biala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to report that several of us, I think Councilman Brian McCarthy and myself, I think Al Collins is not here, but I think several of us, including Public Works, we finished a odor study for the areas near the landfill and the sewage plant. We finally got money dedicated to a study, and so we had to have 3 sessions, usually about 2 to 3 hours, right? And fortunately, they didn't have to go to 4th one because I just didn't know how I could do it again. But anyway, so hopefully the report is going to yield something constructive about where the smells are coming from parts of Marina near there. Thank you.
All right, Marina Bertem.
Yes, I just wanted to add something. The San Gilia tour was especially interesting because I had just talked to Tamsi and asked them about their habitat management plan and whether or not the surf line would be if San Gilia impacted their surf line. So I had several jurisdictions there and started talking a little bit about that, and we'll continue to talk about it offline with the executive director. But the answer I got is that they had already completed their habitat mitigation plan, which was interesting to know that. So thank you.
Yeah, on the San Gilia tour, first thanks to Lane, 'cause I think it was his idea, but maybe not. But he worked to make that happen. And it just happened to be this super great year that's, very unusual in Marina to see this little itty bitty normal plant be, 12 to 18 inches tall in some cases, and very obvious, and thousands of them putting on a show that I haven't seen in Marina before. So it's very coincidental that Lane picked the best year for us to actually see what it can do, because it's very underwhelming if you were to go out there to expect to see an endangered species and it's nothing. It's just like we're worried about that, but in this case, oh my gosh, that is a beautiful plant that, it's a good thing that we're protecting it. That's probably what most people thought by the end of the day. So it really worked well for staff and city council to see it. So thank you, Lane, for doing that. And that picture we got of you with your nose, a centimeter from the ground is pretty special. Yeah.
Well, I think we owe that to you, Mayor, because I've never had those magnifying glasses like that. And, if someone really wants to look at it, they need to contact the mayor, because you can look at it and you look at a plant normally and you see maybe 2 or 3 things, but you look at those magnifying glasses and all of a sudden there's 50 different parts in that plant. And it's like, you begin to appreciate how complex these little, because you think of a little thing like that and it's way more complex than you can even begin to understand. And so hit up the mayor if you want to look at those.
One way. Since we all are reporting back from our meetings, I appreciate it. I just wonder, could we possibly, maybe this is a question for Lane, since we don't have a person up here on the dais for the mosquito abatement, which perhaps we may want to think about in the future. I'd like to hear about what happens after those meetings, especially since it's been a crazy year for rain. So is there a way for our representative either to report back to us or in some manner reconsider down the line?
Yes,
What that looks
we'll
like.
follow up with her and have her either give a written report or verbal report back to the council of what is happening at those meetings. We can certainly do that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think we're ready to adjourn. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Juan and Brian, for being here. Doug, thank you. Oh, Lane has one more item. I'm sorry.
Yep, we did have a special meeting scheduled next Tuesday to go over our Preston Park budget. We still don't have that budget yet, so we need to cancel that meeting. I appreciate everyone for clearing your calendars.
It's worse than that. I had 4 tickets to the football
Oh,
game
no.
and I gave them away
Oh,
for
no.
free, $200. So now 4 other people are going to see the LA Football Club play the Monterey Bay
Oh,
Football
no.
Club instead of
Now,
me.
now I feel really bad. We don't have that budget yet, so we,
You mean to pay for my tickets?
I'll work on that. So sorry, but next Tuesday is free and we'll just have it on our next regular council meeting.
All right.
Preston Park budget.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned tonight.